Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the show today. This is Halloween here for Night Owls. Really happy to have you join us for a little bit of your night. I'm assuming some of you guys are probably still in the midst of giving out the candies and possibly even going to watch a horror movie or so, which is awesome. So thank you for coming over here and joining us. We are going to chat about some regular stuff we do, news and stuff, and a little bit about Halloween. But it's a favorite holiday of many people, I do believe. Certainly my favorite holiday, and I spent my Halloween yesterday quite quietly. It was my Sunday, so stayed home and watched a bunch of horror movies. The weird thing about it, though, of course, we have Thundero here with us, but he was helping his wife, so he might be a minute. But the funny thing about it was I was watching all week, of course, I've been watching horror movies, but I was watching the part two of No One Sleeps in the Woods Tonight, which is a Polish film series. And it's actually quite fun. I suggest you go watch it. The first one's a good old classic horror slasher movie, with a little bit of supernatural twist. And the second one was, I would say, brilliant as far as turning everything on its head, which it quite literally does in the movie. I thought was interesting. But if you haven't seen those Polish movies, go check them out. They're pretty good. Recently, a lot of the best things I've been seeing have been coming out of Europe, actually. Unfortunately, America isn't really putting out some good stuff. I did watch the Secrets of the Shanchi last night, and that was eh eh eh.
Yeah,
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 it wasn't great. But the funny thing about it was that the No One Sleeps in the Woods Tonight Part Two and the first one as well, quite grotesque. They're more of a grotesque slasher type movie than an actual horror movie. But then I went and watched the last night. I watched the Mirror Scenes again, series again with the first one with Kiefer Sutherland, which is a pretty good little movie, and the second one with Nick Stahl, the guy who played John Connor in the Terminator 3. And where the second one, she was so squeamish about some of the blood in that, and it's weird. You have this super grotesque thing, and then something that's just more horrifically bloody, and it freaked her out. So I don't understand that, but whatever. Because it does have a couple good kill scenes in that movie, to be honest with you. But so I'm kind of curious what horror movies you guys have been watching. Tis the season, as it is. But while I ask Thundero what horror movies he may be watching today, I'm gonna go over and hit that like share button. I hope you guys do the same. So,
uh,
what'd you
we didn't
watch?
watch any horror movies. She watched the first Resident Evil movie because she likes it.
Uh huh.
But we didn't watch any today specifically. Unless you did, you watch any horror movies today, maybe? No, but she's been watching them all month.
Yeah, sure. Why
October's her
not?
favorite month.
Yeah, why not?
Um, but I'm not a big horror movie guy, so I don't really watch them. I just don't understand the incentive to be afraid of something. To purposely make yourself afraid, I don't. That just doesn't sound like a good time to me.
Well, I don't know that any of them are really particularly scary. They do hold a, sense of dread, I suppose. It's just inciting an emotion, I guess. Um, but I hear this argument a lot, and it's fine. It's okay. But I like them.
Plus, I grew up in an era where there haven't been any really good scary movies pretty much my whole life. And
Well,
what I
there's a
mean by
couple.
scary, I don't just mean like startling or, briefly disturbing. I mean like people killing themselves after watching it kind of movies. Like you had that in the 70s especially, that just like The Exorcist and what was it, Omen, I think?
Yeah,
Just messed with people so badly that they were in therapy or literally committed suicide over it.
yeah,
Yeah, that to me is a scary movie. What we have now is brief movies with tension and then a brief fright. That's what we
yeah.
have now.
No, and we to be fair, we have to acknowledge that people have become quite jaded compared to what they used to be.
Yes.
Because if you watch The Exorcist now for young kids, they probably laugh at it.
Yeah.
But when that came out, that was truly, truly emotionally scarring to a lot of people. And you know, it's the times have changed, so that is a fair point. It is a fair point. I think one of the best scary sound movies is certainly the remake of The Haunting. I've mentioned this before, and it didn't get very good reviews, but that movie has got some of the best horror soundtrack I've ever heard. It's really, really builds the tension. But you know, to each his own. I really enjoy them. Your wife really enjoys it. My wife will certainly watch them. She's not afraid to watch them, but she often doesn't look at the screen. She's usually grabbing my hand and looking backwards. That's her thing. So I don't know what that is, but you know, okay. That's part of the fun of horror movies too, is that, you know, for a guy anyway. But I did watch a bunch of horror movies. Been trying to dig stuff out. I actually watched this Brazilian TV show, season one, like I think it was 6 episodes or something like that, called The Invisible City. Um, it was okay. It was okay. The real problem is so many of the stuff that's, you know, actual some actual quality behind it. It's all crap. It's all political now. It just isn't fun. I mean, having a final girl in a horror movie is standard, and psychologically it makes sense. It's not a big deal, but now it's you know it's just this annoying feminist crap, and it's like, well, that's not the point, man. She succeeds beside, you know, to spite her nose, as it were. You know, the final girl. But
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the other problem is so many of these movies are used for stupid messaging now.
Mm,
When that was never the thing of it. The thing of it was, the reason why a lot of, especially slasher movies, used a pretty young girl is because, well, how else are you going to get the men to come watch?
yeah, but it's also playing on some very basic emotions, right? I mean, no one cares if a guy dies. That doesn't matter
Hmm.
unless he's some hunky, you know, oh my God, you know, wasted, you know, from the girl's point of view. But then no one cares if the men die. But if a girl dies, it's having a double effect. One, you're kind of sparking the defense mechanism, natural defense mechanism of a man, in a safe setting. So even a cowardly man can be brave in that situation. And it's also sparking the just genuine fear of women live in, right? So it's very successful, and you know, of course, that's why you have final girls, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not, and it never was a point, but now it is the point, and therefore
Yeah.
you're screwing it up. It's not fun. You know, I don't need your help. Don't touch me. Okay, all right, fine. Just try to help. Go over there. The monster will eat you. Go ahead. Go ahead. But whatever, it doesn't matter. There's still a lot of good horror movies you can find from the past, and there's a lot of people making really B crap that if you can bear it, you can have some fun with that too, if you can bear it. Because anybody and their brother can make a movie today, and trust me, they do. So there is some pretty bad crap out there. But I did watch a bunch of stuff, so I've been enjoying myself. Hopefully, you guys too. Dumb's the name said he's been playing the first Dead Space, which that's a fun game. Yeah, and that's a spooky game as well. That one in Silent Hill, it's really done. It's well done stuff. So you know, the thing that was interesting in Mirrors, I do believe. I can't remember because usually it's a cat scare, right? There's a cat jump out of a cabinet or something, right? But that movie actually has a pigeon scare.
Pigeon.
Yeah, pigeon. But I suppose we've seen bird scares before. But you know, it's got Kiefer Sutherland over emoting as usual. You know, perfect. So
Hmm.
yeah. The first one was they actually had a story behind it. It was kind of fits in the vein of the more modern, successful stuff like The Conjuring or Insidious, which those are fun movies. They're not scary per se, but they're fun. There is a good story there, and
Yeah.
I still haven't had the courage to go watch *Malignant* because, Jesus, I think James Wan really is taking the piss. I think
Mm.
he was having him a chuckle. And I don't know if I'm ready to go and enjoy his parody. But I don't know. We'll see how time goes. I think that's going to become a classic because of the parody. But anyway, so what else did you do today for Halloween?
We went and just looked around at stuff. We went to a couple consignment shops, and we need a. Well, we don't need, but we want to get a new dresser,
What's
and
a
we'd like to
consignment
get a
shop?
like a basically. It's like a secondhand store, but the
Hmm.
people sell them themselves. So what they do is they take it there and they co-sign it off, and they sell it. So they sell it for basically the shop sells it for other people, and then they take a cut, and there it is.
Huh.
Keeps their overhead real low, and it allows them to have really nice stuff for cheap because people are just trying to get rid of it. So like, and usually you can find like antique or old stuff there, which is always better built than modern garbage. Because most modern garbage is exactly that, garbage, cheap, made
Well,
of cheap, not even wood type furniture, that kind of stuff.
well, it's
And
veneer on top of veneer.
yes,
That's what it is.
whereas the old stuff you can actually find, still solid wood things. So like they had a really nice actual wood dresser, a couple of them. One was only like $120. Another one we found a really big, like 6 foot, like a wide one, not a tall one, and it was only $75. And we almost bought it, but long story short, we might be getting some free ones soon, so we decided to hold off.
Yeah, well, that's
And
cool. We don't have that
so
over
we did
here.
that. Then we went and looked at some Christmas stuff for her to decorate her office with, and got her a little tree and some cool lights.
You got
And what else?
Thanksgiving first. What are you doing? You're jumping the gun.
Eh, nobody cares about Thanksgiving anymore. And then what else did we get? Oh, then we went grocery shopping and got some stuff. And then she came home and made us dinner and passed out candy.
That was a very sad statement you just made
Why?
because Thanksgiving's a fun holiday.
Oh, yeah. No, it's most of my family's dead,
Hmm.
and her family, nobody likes each other. Uh, there's
Okay.
only about one person in her family I'd actually want to spend that day with, and she's going to demand that everybody be there, and I don't want to deal with that. So, and I don't like my family very much, and they don't like me very much, and we both agreed that that's fine. So Thanksgiving's kind of like to us. It's kind of one of those
I see.
holidays.
I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Halloween's our holiday, and we already did our anniversary stuff on Friday. We went and saw Dune.
And
Very good movie. Very good. No politics in it at all, aside from like the fact that there's non-white people in it. But so what? So, and the people who are supposed to be redheads are all bald. I don't know why. I have no idea why. When they're all still white as snow like they're supposed to be, yet all bald. I don't know. For some reason, the director just the ginger side is real, and we can't even see red hair. Not permitted.
yeah.
Um, but other than that, it was pretty good. It's Paul's movie. The Zendaya chick, she's in it, but she's only really in it in visions, and then right at the end. Other than that, she's not in it at all.
Well, yeah, but see, the
Uh,
problem is the next movie's all about her, though,
well,
not
that's what he
him.
said. We'll see, because they would have to do a complete shift. Because this first movie is literally all about him. He's in basically every scene,
As he should be.
and it's his whole story, his whole journey, him becoming more comfortable with who he's born to be. Uh, and yeah, I mean he's 100% the messianic character that he's supposed to be. Now they could do a full on curveball and be like, oh, his first movie was really good and it was really fairly what's the word I'm looking for, fairly faithful, and then just do a curveball, but lol, just kidding.
Well,
One
it
of
has
those
been
moves.
greenlit, so it is coming. You know,
Yeah.
but to be fair, Villeneuve is he's a really good filmmaker. He
Yes.
is a good filmmaker. I mean, his stuff is atmospheric. It's slow, but that's in a good way. You know, so I like the filmmaker just fine. And I'm glad to hear it's good, and everyone's been saying it's pretty much spot on. So Roger says he loves Thanksgiving. Let's see what the king allows this year for we the people. Well, fuck the king, dude. Down with the king, right? Who cares what he says? But Yeah, that's good to hear actually, because I probably will check that movie out. But because I've become real skittish when it comes to movies, Thundero. I don't know if you noticed modern
Oh yeah, I've
stuff.
noticed. Sorry, the wife was in here asking me something. Yeah, we the most. This is one of the this, unless I'm right, which I mean that's a silly thing to say because I probably am. Um, and this woke stuff just dies off, and at most we get basically what Dune was, where they just did weird stuff with races that I don't. Whatever makes you feel better. If every movie has that level of non wokeness in it and is faithful enough, because it is, it's pretty good. The only real problem, other than like worrying about political stuff, is the guy who's playing him's really skinny, but he's supposed to be like a 15-year-old kid, so it's
Yeah.
like, eh.
Well, I
But
said that from the beginning. He's fine for Paul right now, but
yeah,
Paul in the future he's not okay for. Because keep in
which
mind the whole
I
Fremen thing takes years.
right, which I think because they show he has
A
a
vision,
vision of himself in the future as a great Fremen warrior, right?
right?
And they CGI his face. You've seen it in the trailer, I think. You see, he CGI'd his face into the suit, so he looked because the guy looks big. He looks like a full grown man instead of a tiny little boy. So I think they're fully aware of the fact that this guy's really skinny and it was intentional because they
Okay.
do a shot where he's in just like in shorts and you can tell how real skinny he is. Even my wife was like, "Oh, he's really skinny." I
Yeah,
think that was
he's a twist.
intentional. Yeah.
Yeah. See,
So
I
I
don't.
think the plan is to get him bigger as in the next, because of what I understand they only plan on doing two movies, which I don't know how they're going to pull that off. But
Well, he's a full-grown adult. I don't know how they're going to get him bigger. So,
yeah, I don't either.
yeah.
Hang on one second.
But this is kind of one of the problems in Hollywood. They have a lot of times, especially when they do want to have a younger actor or the character's younger, they just go find really small, little teeny actors and try to play it off that way, which I get. Because if you go and hire a teenager or a kid to do a part, you're not hiring them to be an actor because they're not going to be an actor. You're hiring them to fit because their character fits the point. Harry Potter is a good example. When they got those kids that they hired all had the characteristics of the character they were going to play. They're not actors, and we see now as they're adults that they're not. Right? Daniel Radcliffe has tried to dig some chops out, but not really. The other guy, the Ron Weasley character, didn't even bother. Uh, which he's probably the smartest one. Emma Watson couldn't act her way out of a wet paper bag, so and it's fine because they weren't hired as great actors. The other direction you can go is to get a little person. The problem is when little persons start showing their age a little bit, they don't look so great. Kind of Nick Stahl is a very good example. I said I just watched Mirrors 2, where he's the star of that. He's also the star of Terminator 3, playing John Connor, and he's actually not a bad actor. He's just really teeny, and he got ugly, which they kind of do. Same thing that happened with the kids from Game of Thrones, the two daughters, right? Now that one daughter who doesn't get hardly any screen time, I have a feeling she turned out probably quite lovely, but she's not. She's what, three scenes or something in the whole series, but nevertheless, we are going to be getting into some new stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and jump over and start doing that while he is dealing with Halloween, because that's what's going on in his house right now. So let me go ahead and do that. And we do have some fun little things to have a chuckle at, which is kind of the point. So let me go ahead here, and I'll start out with my normal stuff, which of course is all about board games. But seeing as we have Halloween here, I thought I'd talk about some horror stuff. Now, here we have Werewolf the Party Game. Now, I don't know if you guys played that before. Now, when I was a kid, we would play this game or some version of this game because you don't need. These days, you could buy cards and you can kind of have it like an official board game. But when we were kids, we just kind of did it normal with pieces of paper, right? Big group of people at camping or Boy Scouts or some church event or something like that. Now, Werewolf, of course, is the one where you close your eyes and or you have the one where someone is winking and you see if you can catch the wink, or various things to who's the werewolf and who and to catch the werewolf or the vampire or the witch or whatever the monster is in the theme of the game. But they're all basically the same. But there is a really good game that you can buy. It's just a little card deck that it makes it really easy, and it has a tablet with it, a tablet app that you can play, and it's got some eerie music, and it tells you when to close your eyes, when to open your eyes, etc., etc. And it's cool. I love the integration of modern technology into board gaming. I think it's great, and Werewolf is a perfect example of this because I played this kind of game when I was a kid all the time, and I played it with the tablet, and it's way better. It's so much cooler. Simple, cheap, super cheap game to buy if you're having a parties and you wanna have a kind of a horror themed game. Of course, werewolf. I don't know if the young kids play these kind of games anymore, but we certainly did. But next, I just kind of have a list here of some good horror-based or Halloween-based games that you might want to check out. These are really good ones. This here, of course, first off, number 10 on this list is Betrayal at a House on the Hill. Now, they just had a remake of this come out, and as well as with Mansions of Madness, and they have apps associated with them too. And it has improved the gameplay, I think. But in this one right here, you're building out the house that you're in. There's a book that has stories that you're kind of, depending on what's happening, you go to a different page and you read the events that are happening. You have characters trying to fight their way through the house, etc., etc. There's a little bit of mystery. It's it's a popular game in and of itself, not just a horror game. This is one of those kind of essentials you should have in your collection. And I absolutely suggest it. It's a great fun game. You will enjoy it no matter what time of year it is. Next, we have Fury of Dracula. Now, this is the modern map and set. You can probably find this cheap at used stores for nothing. They've have the two or three editions have been going on now. But this is a fun little game where one of the people in the at the table is playing Dracula, and the rest are each choose a character. You know, you're playing some character, and you're all trying to work together to figure out where Dracula is. And Dracula, of course, is moving around, and you're hunting him. It's a mystery game, and it's quite a bit of fun. It's a chase game basically. It's quite long. It's not like the other one. This one is a long game. But if you got a nice winter night that you want to kill with a group of friends, Fury of Dracula is great. And the newest edition they have from Fantasy Flight, I think it is, it's gorgeous, man. I mean, you can see it here on the table, but it's a really pretty production, and that's a great thing about modern board games. Their production is gorgeous. Fury Dracula, really good game actually. This right here is Chaos in the Old World. This is more of a miniatures on the board. You're moving around, controlling areas, having to fight the evil back. This is more of a standard, heavier board game, and it's okay. Some people really like it. I think the production value is absolutely gorgeous, but this is from Simon, so you would expect it would be. Anyway, it's not really high on my choice, but Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game. Legendary Encounters thing is fun. I don't have the alien one or there's a few different themes. The one I have is superheroes, Marvel superheroes, and I love it to death. It's one of the best superhero board games you can buy. It's a co-op game. You're working together and you're all collecting these. It's a deck builder, so you're collecting your decks of superheroes because you're a shield agent, of course, and you're trying to work together to protect the city and defeat the ultimate mastermind. This one is same thing. It's just done with aliens, and like I think there's several different themes put on the legendary encounters mechanic. I've never played the alien one. I don't know, but I do love the system. It's quite a fun game actually. This one did a winner. The crossover system. Crossover games have a deck, and each deck is its own separate story. And you can buy new decks, and you can have new stories. That's it. It's very simple, and it seems to be very popular. I've never played it, but it became very popular very quickly. So maybe it's something you want to check out. Eldritch Horror is classic. You play this on an app as well. You're just collecting resources, trying to defeat various problems. This is a much simpler game than the other ones before, but simple isn't necessarily bad. So, and it's got the Cthulhu theme on it. So, neat. Nemesis, never played it. I don't know anything about it. Maybe it's a newer game. I don't know. I never played it before. Let's see, Kingdom Death Monster. Now, Kingdom Death Monster, I've never played this either, but it deserves a comment simply for the fact that this is the most successful, biggest money-making Kickstarter in history. This was even bigger than Star Citizen, I think, because Star Citizen, most of the money they made was after the Kickstarter on their website. I do believe. I could be wrong, but I do think this is the largest one in history, and it made ridiculous millions. I mean, what was it, 15, 18 million or something like that? And it's basically a very weird setting where you're like survivors and in some weird pre reality existence or something. I don't know what it is. It's weird, but it's gorgeous miniatures and it's quite popular. Mansions of Madness, of course, right here. This is Kingdom Death Monster. Sorry, I had it wrong, but it's expensive as hell, by the way. Mansions of Madness, like I said, they just come out with a new one that has an app assistance on your tablet or computer with it. It's a beautiful game, fun. Easy, not much to say there. Arkham Horror, of course, card game, as well as the Arkham Horror board game. These are this is the last entry here. But whether it be the card game or the board game, they're a lot of fun. The original Arkham Horror has, well, I don't know how many expansions came out with it. 50, it feels like. But you this is an in-depth game, particularly the board game over the card game, but it's super in-depth. It's so in-depth it's collectible. So there you go. Anyway, so there is what's considered the top 10 horror board games in existence, and I don't disagree. They're really good games, all of them. And if you like this kind of theme, especially Cthulhu, as you notice, many of them had the Lovecraftian imagery on top of it. Go check them out. Anyway, you back?
I am.
Awesome. Whew, that took a lot of breath. I was trying to pace myself. But that is fun, though. These are really good games. I've enjoyed playing quite a bit, especially the Arkham Horror. If you have time, the old classic Arkham Horror, it takes a lot of time, but it's also kind of like a D&D game, Thundera, where
Hmm.
you can save your game. They even have a system set up for you to save your game, and just pick it up next Saturday, and you could do it over the course of months if you wanted to. I mean,
Hmm.
it is a fun game, and I do love those kind of things that allow you to do that. It's kind of like the Pathfinder game system, where for people to play D&D who maybe are kind of afraid to sit down at a table and role play. Instead, you can just do a board game version of it that I think captures the taste of it quite well. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, not bad idea at all. I
yeah,
actually we were at the store the other day, and we walked by because most of the big department stores have a big board game section,
sure, yeah,
and we walked by, and I was like, "We should start playing board games." And my wife said, "Yeah." So I don't know. I might start getting into it more. We'll see.
Well, it's a cheap hobby. Well,
Well,
not always.
sometimes it's a cheap. Yeah,
Well, not always. Just
depends on
true.
the game you buy.
That's true. I bought the entire Mythic Battles set, and that cost me like almost $800, right?
Yeah.
So not all of them, but in general, you pick up a board game for 20 to $50 in general, right? And you can't buy all the games. I mean, there's thousands of games come out every year. You can't buy everything. So what I did when I was building my collection was I tried to find the best example of each individual genre and mechanic that exists in board gaming, right? And
Hmm.
I've kind of some of them overlap, or I've even doubled up a few times. But in general, I have what I feel is the best representation of this mechanic or that mechanic that you can get, and that's how I went about my collection. And the cool thing is whatever type of gaming I feel like doing, I have a board game, or probably two, to choose from to do that kind of mechanic, and that's kind of the fun of the hobby. And it's not really expensive because it's not like you're going out and buying 10 board games this weekend. You're going to buy one. Maybe this month you'll buy one, right?
Right.
And you go home and you play it. And the good thing is about the board games, it's quite different than when you were a kid. Is when we were kids, board games were, well, everyone has Monopoly, Life, Parcheesi, Mousetrap, etc. Right? It's like these standard games. But these days, the developers understand that you don't have to make a game that has legacy that will last, for 100 years, like say Monopoly. They're making games now that they're meant to be played as a one shot. I mean, that's the point. You're spending 20, $30 and you're getting, a month or two of entertainment out of it, and you'll probably never pick it up again. And a lot of them will even go so far as you're playing the game, you're putting stickers on the board and you're destroying cards and you're doing all kind of stuff because the landscape of the story of the board game is changing, and therefore you're invested in it. But when you're done, well, you actually can't go back and play it again. So it's a one-shot board game, and it's become quite popular. And from a collector's point of view, makes sense, right? Because that's where the world has gotten. It isn't like we're going to play, hey, we're going to play Monopoly for the 10,000th time this weekend. Are you coming over? It's not like that anymore. You know, I like that. Anyway,
Indeed.
moving on here. This is an interesting headline, I thought.
Dave Chappelle and Joe Rogan co-headline a sold-out New Orleans comedy show. It's good.
Now, that's interesting, don't you think?
I do. I also have very much liked since Joe Rogan moved from California and he is now in Texas. It seems that the scales are falling from his eyes a little bit.
Hmm.
He's had some very interesting takes as of late, and Chappelle, same way. He got away from California and Hollywood bullshit, and a lot of his takes have started to make far more sense.
Well,
So
yeah. They're getting
funny,
older.
funny how that happens. Yeah, you get
Yeah.
older, you get away from these psychopaths who constantly barrage you with hate and tell you it's love, and you start to see what they were doing, and you start to resent them a bit. You know, you get a little angsty about it because you realize what they were doing to you. That you were basically in an abusive relationship with the governments of that area especially, and the people in that area, the people who
Mhm.
control it, and you see through it. Now Chappelle saw through it a long time ago, but
Yeah.
I think being in Ohio here has helped him a lot as far as the way he speaks about stuff. It's just far more mature. He's matured, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying, and that's obviously
That
through
seems
time
so.
too. But
Yeah, it seems
and
so.
then Rogan, I mean, he's about an eyelash away from a major lawsuit with CNN. So hey, I can't complain. They just keep tripling down on the absolute slander that they committed against him. So I find that amazing. I find that amazing to watch. I hope he does. He should. He should get
Well,
the team together. A big, heavy lawyer. Find a firm. That's a big case. That could be big money, and just go after him for it.
yeah,
Go even if he loses.
like
Make him
Steve.
spend a bunch of money.
Yeah, well, Steven's doing the Steven Crowder's doing the same thing, but he does.
Yep.
Steven doesn't really have the fu money that Joe Rogan does.
Exactly.
So, and it's weird because these companies like CNN or ABC, NBC, except MSNBC, they're bullies. right?
Yep.
And they bully people because they know they can't afford to do anything about it. And this is
That's
one of
right.
the most messed up thing about our legal system is that you can be bullied and not be able to do anything about it.
Yep.
That's broken, right? But the problem is you got to be careful who you bully because Joe Rogan, he can bully you back,
Yes. He's bigger
right?
than them. He's 10 times their size.
Yeah, well,
Minimum.
financially, they have monsters behind them, dude. But I'm
Yeah, but
saying
he,
he's
as far
capable.
as his
He's
his
capable.
platform, his reach, I hate that term because it's such leftist nonsense, but his platform, his reach is 10 times the biggest show they've had in the last 15 years.
Oh yeah, no, that's true.
Even
That's
their
true.
big giant news shows where something big happens don't reach his numbers. Not even
Right.
close.
No, no, you're right.
And
You're right.
he knows that now, and he's starting to. I think he's starting to flex it a little bit
And he should.
because I think he's just had enough of the out and out nonsense that these people spew, and then demand that you agree with them.
Mm,
It's
mm.
different if they were just out here on a street corner talking nonsense, right? Nobody would care. You just walk past them like the crazy preachers. But these people insist, with the force of as much law as they can muster, that you agree with their nonsense,
Yeah.
or they will, threaten your livelihood or threaten your children, quite literally. Um, that's not acceptable. And the
Yeah.
only reason it's permitted to continue in this country is because we've basically outlawed the ability for men to handle it. You can't hardly even defend yourself in many places in this country anymore. When you're being physically assaulted by three different people, you can't defend yourself if your
Well,
name's Kyle Rittenhouse.
if you're the
So,
right color or the right
yes,
politic, you can, right? And this, of
yes,
course, is the two-faced nature of socialism. Uh, but um, but no, I understand and agree with that 100%. That's not what I meant. What I meant was the judicial system in many countries, in America particularly, it has a cap, meaning it's
yeah,
set up for the elite to do what they need to do. If you
correct.
have that kind of money, you can play that game. The average person cannot. So even though CNN has way much more financial backing than he does, it doesn't matter. The system has its elite price tag, and if you can pay that price tag, you're good to go, right? And
Yes,
it's just that most people don't, and
I have an
that's
easy fix
radically
for that.
broken. Yeah,
Easy fix for that. We bring back duels,
yeah,
legalize them.
yeah.
That motherfucker says some nonsense on his show. Call him out to a duel.
Okay.
Make
Yes.
make it make it shameful to reject a duel to somebody you were talking crap about. You were dishonoring.
Celebrity
That
death
was that
matches.
used to be how we solved it.
It
They said
used to
some
be.
nonsense.
Yeah.
They got handled,
Yeah,
or they apologized.
and
One or the other.
whoever won the situation was considered to be right,
That's right.
and that's the important aspect of it. But on the other side of this headline here, I think it's very interesting because I haven't seen any of the modern Dave Chappelle stuff. I saw a few clips of when I think he was on Saturday Night Live when he was playing the homeless drug addict character,
Hmm.
and it was funny. It was funny. I haven't seen any of his modern stuff, but everyone
No,
says
that was
he's
his own show. That was a Chappelle show.
was
Did he
it?
have like white lips and stuff, like
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah,
whited out
yeah,
lips?
yeah,
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 that
yeah.
was his own show. Yeah, it was his crackhead character he played all the time, and he
Crackhead
was
thing.
funny.
Well, whatever it was, I seen clips from it, and it was funny. So I'm assuming he's funnier. He's older, more mature, and people love him, so I'm sure he's great. Joe Rogan, I've seen a few clips of his stand up too. He's not that bad, dude. He's actually not a bad stand up comedian.
No, he's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, he's not. I doubt he's anything near Chappelle or Bill Burr or any of these other guys, but he's not bad. It's an interesting team up, man.
I
I
personally, as far as stand up goes, would listen to Burrow over Chappelle. But
oh yeah,
Chappelle, when it
yeah,
comes to situational humor, so like skits or whatever, like his show was, there's nobody better at that brand of comedy. So like what Saturday Night Live used to be, or at least it was occasionally when it would actually be funny, he's just the best at making that. He can make it a little situation, a little scene, and get humor out of it. One of his best ones of all time is he had I don't remember what he called it, but basically it was a white representative and a black representative, and they were doing an arbitration over what white people have to give up to be able to use the N word in public.
yeah.
And it's so It's you just gotta go watch it. It's great. By the end of it, they give up all this stuff, and then the white guy says it, and the black guy still kicks his ass.
Okay, that's funny. But
It's
yeah,
funny.
I just don't gravitate toward Dave because he is a racist, and I just I mean, I know
Yeah,
all the jokes I make, I actually don't like racists, which is probably
yeah.
why I joke about it. But I'm not a big fan, and Bill Burr is very not a racist, right? He's
Yeah.
just a hard talking, honest comedian, is what he is, and
The only
he's
problem I have
really good
with
at what he
Bill is because his wife is like a super progressive, crazy black lady. He has adopted some of her inflections over the
Yeah,
years,
but he
and that
calls her out
happens.
for it too, though.
But he does. If
Yeah,
you listen to any of his podcasts where she's on, he'll call her out for it all the time.
yeah. But I mean,
Um,
you got to keep in mind though, it is his wife.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's what I was gonna say. It's you marry somebody that's gonna happen,
that's the way it
and at the
is.
same time, he is just insanely funny. Like he's
He's
just
very talented. Yeah,
you can. He's one of those guys who doesn't even need a script. He doesn't need material.
yeah.
You just give him something, and he will riff, and it will be funny. I've watched like there's a video on YouTube from some whatever I don't know what it is. It's like a little panel of him and some other comedians. Joe Rogan's on it, and he just starts roasting Rogan for like 15 minutes. And it's so good. He just shreds him. And Joe's just laughing himself to tears because he's so good.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Uh,
roast is very hard to do. You can roast somebody and say some actually messed up stuff that hurts their feelings if you're not careful, if you don't know how to do it. So it's
right.
really hard to do right and
Yeah.
not come off as a total D-bag. And he
Well,
just nailed it. It was
well,
so
well. The
good.
old Hollywood group used to do the roast all the time.
Yep.
And but yeah, there is a way to go about it, and it has to be coming from friends. That's
Yes.
important aspect of it. But yeah, another aspect of like a comedian stand up who's really funny, and has a little bit different of a personality is Eddie Izzard. Now, Eddie Izzard
Yep.
is a British guy. He always called himself the executive transvestite. And he is that in real life, sometimes. But now here's a guy who is definitely on the fringe of sexuality, but I've never heard him ever be a dick bag about it, right?
Yep.
He's always just, making fun of some situation or even maybe himself. But there's a guy whose stand up, his acting is not actually he's not a bad actor, but his stand up is straight up funny.
Mm.
Now I don't know if he can riff or anything like that, but his prepared material is funny.
Yeah,
And
and some
this,
people can't. Some people are great. Like Rogan's great at riffing. Really, I mean, look at his show. It wouldn't be
yeah,
that popular if he was boring, and that's why it's one of the reasons it's so popular. Yeah, he has some interesting guests and gets some pretty big names that you would never ever see in any other place like that with a long form interview, like yeah, Robert Downey Jr. on and stuff like that. They would never do a media interview like that for 2 hours, never. But he'll do it with Rogan because Rogan is a very good speaker and he's fun to be around. He's just a
yeah.
fun guy.
Oh,
Whereas
I'm
other
sure.
guys can't do that. I think Chappelle, personally, just all the stuff I've ever seen of him, he's at his best when he does skit like material, so prepared stuff. And then there's other guys like Bill Burr who can just riff and just blow your mind with how his mind just keeps going. You're not going to shout shit talk him because he's going to
No,
tear you apart. So don't even try.
no. It's kind of like trying to get into a debate with Ben Shapiro. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what you're
Yeah.
you're doing.
Even if he's wrong, Shapiro's going to be tough to beat because he
Oh,
knows how to debate.
you ain't gonna
Simple as
get him.
that.
Well, it's also his brain is moving at 1,000 miles an hour.
Hmm.
It's always funny to me when I see these people think they're gonna come up and challenge Ben Shapiro. I just sit back and smile because that boy's gonna eat you up. I'm telling you. I
Yeah,
mean, Ben
he's good.
Shapiro. Yeah, he's really good.
It's
Yeah.
it's that Jew blood. He can't
Yeah,
help it.
it's
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 just
what it
what he's
is.
born
It's
to
what it
do is
is.
to
Yeah,
argue.
yeah. Well, no,
But
Joe.
Adrian says rumor is that Chappelle is going to be opening a comedy club in his town he lives in Ohio.
Why not?
Like I said, that town is only about an hour from me. It's right outside of Dayton. It's like a suburb of Dayton.
Yeah,
And yeah, why not? It's a nice little town. I mean, by say town, it's probably actually technically a city, but it's very very small one because Ohio has a ton of those. Um, and I think that's a great idea. I think
yeah,
I think it would help the area. I think it'll give him a place where he can work from home, basically. And there's certain things like that that I think will be beneficial for America's culture as a whole to be spread out of these hotspots because the hotspots are infested with nonsense. So
Sure.
just move them.
Yeah. Well,
Simple as that.
and he's got the reputation to pull
Yeah.
acts, and he could certainly make something of it. It actually this conversation kind of makes me think. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. I 'cause I only get phone calls from my family when someone dies. You know, and my
Yeah.
uncle passed away here yesterday. And so I talked to my family and my dad for quite a bit. And my dad is, an old guy, but he's still running security for a big giant casino, right? He'll never
Yes.
retire. They'll have to carry him out in a bag. But he's just that old generation, I guess. But anyway, and he was telling me about how they were having to organize stuff because they'll get someone in, like, say, a Blake Sheldon, right? Is that his name, Sheldon or Shelton? He's that country singer guy.
I think it's Shelton. I think it's
Shelton. He's
Shelton.
actually got a pretty good voice. He's a pretty good singer, actually. But anyway, he'll come in easy, normal, no problem. But then he'll get a Harry Styles came in, I guess, recently, and all he said all the damn feather boas. He doesn't understand what the feather boa thing is. I don't get it either. But I guess the Harry Style ladies wear feather boas. But Harry Style required that you have a vaccine passport and et cetera, et cetera. So it was a pain in the ass for him and his guys because they had to. That's a lot more work for them,
Right.
the security guys. And it was just interesting to listen to him describe it and how silly it was, because it's coming from a point of view where the person has to deal with your nonsense, right?
Yeah.
So still don't know. He's like 74 years old, 75 years old. I don't know what the hell he's still working for, but whatever.
Some people that will never quit. My father is in his late 60s. And I said, why don't you retire? He's fine. Like he's got my mom's money, all her retirement, everything. That she worked for the state for like 30 years at a hospital, so she's got a decent retirement.
Yeah,
And he's got his own, and he still works. Just like what all he does is he like dispatches lab orders for like the local health system.
sure.
So it's not like it's a hard job, but he works constantly because he's like, well, what else would I do?
Yeah,
I'm
and my
like, I
dad said the
guess.
same thing. What else am I gonna do? And it's something he's good at too, and his brain is still just fine and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I mean, with him, my dad's an actual horror show. If you look at him, he's been burned, he's been shot, he's been blown up. He actually scared my wife when they came and visited us once, and he took his shirt off to go into the swimming pool. He's just covered in scars. I mean, he's just been absolutely mauled by life.
Hmm.
So he actually literally still has metal in him from a bomb that went off, a frag mine that went off in Happy Valley in Vietnam. He's literally been walking around my entire life with chunks of metal in his body.
Yeah.
But yet the dude is still up, going and security. You're on your feet all day and stuff like that. It's not like he's, sitting in an office, right?
Sure.
So I don't know. Those old dudes, though, like old sides of beef, I guess. But whatever. Interesting anecdotes.
Well, I
Uh,
always tell my dad, we'll just get like an RV or something and go travel because he's like me, he likes to travel, but
yeah,
I personally like to do it on the road. I love America. America's a great country. If you've never driven the highways of this country, you've missed something beautiful. Because this country is
it
beautiful
is
and it has
beautiful.
beautiful people in
Yeah,
every single state.
yeah,
And I don't just mean beautiful to look at. I mean just good people.
yeah.
And you could just go on an adventure. And for the most part, most places, you're perfectly fine. You're perfectly safe, which is a blessing that most Americans take for granted. And I would love to be able to get like an RV or a bus, like one of those really big, nice ones,
Mm,
probably more than my house type buses,
yeah.
and just travel. Just that's my life now. I just drive around and just travel the country. I don't really have a home. My home is there, and that would be that to me is the perfect retirement. I would love that.
Well,
Um,
you know,
and I think he would like it too. Like he's been trying to go to Europe, but of course he set up the plan to go to Europe, like on a World War II tour type deal, because he's a big World War II nut. Because my grandpa fought in World War II,
yeah,
and he wants to go to all like the hot spots, Normandy, and all that stuff. But COVID has made that impossible for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So he hasn't been able to do it. I think he's going to get to do it next year. And he's older, and he was really heavy, but now he's lost a bunch of weight, and he's vaccinated and everything, so he shouldn't have any problem with that. Um, so I kept telling him, go travel. He's like, yeah, but who would I go with? I'd be lonely. I was like, yeah, also true. I told him just get a girlfriend. My mom's been gone for almost 2 years now. No one will be mad at you.
Yeah, no, that's another problem. My dad, he did lose his wife,
Yeah.
yeah, my wife and I have actually talked several times about taking a year or two, just going to America, buying an RV, and just driving.
Oh, it's so nice, man.
Yeah,
You've driven the highways. I mean, you've lived
I have,
everywhere.
I have, yeah,
Even to this day, it's just still to me, and I don't mind driving on the highway. I hate driving in the city. You get me out on the open road though, I'm having the time of my life. But in the city, I can't stand other people, and they're stupid, and people are dumb. But on the highway, you have less people to deal with unless you buy the cities. So you just get to enjoy just the freedom of driving and the freedom of just being out there. So like when we went down a couple years ago, we went to Tennessee, which isn't that far. It's about 9 hour drive from here. Um, and you just get to go on down 75 and into. I think we went into uh, Knoxville and then off to where we were staying at up in the mountains. And it was just I liked it. My wife didn't like it, but that was when we had our other car, which was a lot smaller. She'd probably like it in our newer, bigger car. Um, but I like it because I don't mind driving, and I wish I had the ability or the means to just do that, do exactly what you just said, just travel around. And
yeah,
there's so much cool stuff, even like out west. There's so much cool stuff between here and California that I've seen because my parents and I used to travel a lot when I was younger, just on vacations or whatever. We'd always drive, and it's just cool stuff that you wouldn't even think to look for that exists off the highways in this country.
yeah.
And I would love to go see it again, see what's still there, see what's not, see how much has changed.
Well,
I don't know,
yeah,
be
no,
fun.
and I would like to do the same. And the good thing about RVs is they have a very high retention on value. So I could
Oh
go
yeah,
buy a 10-year-old RV, and after I was done, sell it and probably get the majority of my money back. So
yeah.
it's just something we've talked about a few times, and I think it'd be fun. And
I
yeah,
think.
Adrian, I've driven into Las Vegas as well, and done that,
Oh
and
yeah,
Las Vegas is fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
We drove when I was younger. When I was, I think, 15 or 16. My father was part of this big convention of for his business. This big national convention. Actually, it was called NASA before NASA existed.
Uh-huh.
And basically, they'd have conventions all over the country. Once a year, they'd have this big meetup convention where you could network and stuff. So it was in San Francisco. So instead of flying from Ohio to San Francisco, we drove. Now it took us a while because we had my grandma with us, so we had to stop fairly regularly. But that was just awesome. That was so. Looking back on it, that was so cool. We drove first when we went through or went to San Francisco. We stayed in the northern part of America, right? So we went through like lower Montana and the Dakotas and everything, and then cut back down to San Francisco. And then when we left San Francisco coming home, we went down the coast all the way over, stopped at the Grand Canyon, all the way up through Texas, and then shot back up. And that's just something you can do in America. And the stuff you get to see is like no other country on earth. It truly is. I mean,
It is
for Christ's sake, we
gorgeous,
went
yeah.
to the Grand Canyon. It's unbelievable, the Grand Canyon. It's if you've never been there, you need to go there if you're in America and have the means.
Yeah, yeah. Take a
Go.
helicopter ride. It costs a few $100 a seat, but do
Yeah,
it. It's
if
worth
you
it.
can afford it, do it. It's
Yeah.
just so cool.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just the beauty of nature. In Montana, I would still if I there's two places in this country that if I was going to move to, one is Montana, the other is probably Arizona just for my sinuses. But Montana for the beauty of it, I can't imagine there's anywhere on the planet more beautiful than Montana. I'm being serious on that.
Oh no,
Like it's
there's
just gorgeous.
America is beautiful, and
Yeah.
an interesting thing is the Chinese name for America is well, how do they say it? Muegol, I think is what they call it. I think I'm mispronouncing that slightly, but whatever. It means beautiful land.
Yeah, I knew that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's one of their plans is to take the beautiful land. I've heard.
Well, the Japanese
Uh
land too. World War II was all about them wanting to take
yep.
the West Coast. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And the West Coast is beautiful. It's just populated by a bunch of idiots.
it
Other
is.
than that, it's
It looks really
beautiful.
bad now, though. But you know, it's funny you mentioned that because we're talking about traveling and stuff, and it just popped in my head. It's completely unrelated. But I was talking to my dad yesterday, and when I was younger, he never talked about his military life, right? Never.
Yeah.
But as he's gotten older here, he's become a lot more chatty. And well, he is an old dude. And I just kind of let him go, you know.
Yeah.
Let him talk and let him, you know, I don't interfere with it. But he was talking to because my dad before he became into the Pentagon and got into all that, you know, I guess that's all Delta Force stuff. But before he got into that, he was a Marine. He was a Marine recon and in Vietnam. And what they would do with those guys, they would fly out of Yokosuka, they would drop them, you know, Halo drop them into the in country. Those guys would
Yeah.
go do something, and they'd walk to a
He
point
was
and get it.
basically real life Rambo.
Yeah, that's what those guys are. And they
Yeah.
get a helicopter ride out. Well, he was talking about, you know, because we were talking about barbecue or cooking or something, and it just sparked a memory, and he went into it, and he was like, "Yeah, well, no, I know what it was because I was talking about how finicky I am. I am a very finicky eater.
Really?
Yes, I am
I would
extremely
not have.
finicky.
I would not have expected that out of you. That's shocking to me.
My wife is not, and my father certainly is, and
Well,
this is
she's
what.
Asian.
Yeah,
They
that's
fucking
true.
eat everything.
But this sparked the memory of his of you know what you know having to survive in the jungle and they'd literally eat anything and he's surprised they didn't poison themselves because they'd eat anything they could find. And he talked about and he just kind of was going rambling on about it. But he talked about where this one drop he was in country 13 days, no resupply, no ammo supply, nothing.
Nice.
And oh Jesus, dude. 13 days in country with just your jump pack? Wow.
Yep.
That's rough. I mean, you think about it for a minute. Think about it for a minute. That's rough, dude. And I don't know if that was the worst situation he's ever had. He didn't say that. But I would just for me, I was like, oof, damn, that's rough, dude. But
Yeah.
anyway,
My it again talking about that. My grandpa told me. Yeah, I was one of the only people he ever talked to this stuff with this stuff for whatever reason. I was a kid, but for whatever reason, he would talk to me about it. Now he didn't tell me anything too bloody or gory or serious, but he did tell me that he was shot down because he was in the Army Air Corps, and their bomber got shot down. He was part of a bombing crew, and he jumped out, right, parachuted out. He got caught in the wind, and it pushed him way off
oh yeah,
from everybody else, and he was trapped for like 2 weeks behind enemy lines with
yeah,
basically nothing but what he jumped out of that plane with.
yeah.
And he said that was the hardest time of his entire life. I said,
I
"Yeah, I
bet.
bet."
I bet. I bet it was. But because my dad was like a master sergeant in that, so he was a platoon sergeant, right?
Yeah,
And well, it was they weren't. I wouldn't think they. I don't know if they call it a platoon. I get brigade or I don't know what they call
whatever,
those
right?
little 12 men. You know, hit squads. I
Is
don't
it
know
just
what
a
they call.
squad? Might just be a squad.
Might just be a squad, but he was the boss, and he you know every time he talks about it, he always kind of gets in this riff. He always says the same thing over and he's getting old, right? He gets the same thing over and over and
Hmm.
over. He gets so mad at those guys to the point he'd knock them out. He'd literally sucker not sucker punch them, but just stiff punch them. If they ever even thought about looking at the automatic switch on their gun.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Because ammo conservation, right?
Oh yeah.
It's a serious thing for those guys. But anyway, that's a whole. I don't even have enough stories to really talk about it because he's so tight-lipped about it. But
Yep.
I just you know that was just an offhand comment he was talking about. He was like, we were just pulling up anything that looked like a vegetable. And I was like, oh, and because he'd say they take their helmets and they'd cook stuff and just boil it in their helmet and eat it, right?
Yeah.
So you know,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't tell me what he like. I don't know if he had rations with him or what. He never told me. He didn't get in that deep in it, but he was just for one day he just randomly told me that because I had done a report, like a book report on him, like not a book report, but like a personal report on him for school because he was World War II vet, and he told me some stories then because he did. He said I've never really told anybody this stuff, so I just put that in my report. And then just one day, I was just hanging out with him. It was right before he died. Actually, he couldn't have been too much longer after he had a
yeah,
brain aneurysm, And so he didn't even know he was like just happened one day. And yeah, he just randomly started telling me about the time he got shot down and was trapped behind enemy lines. I was like, well, that sounds horrible. That sucks.
Well, it's a soldier's job, though, right? It's a soldier's
Yep.
job. Yeah, I don't have too many stories. He did relay one where they had to go take out this radio tower.
Yep.
That was like a, because recon does a lot of that stuff. They'll take out bridges,
Oh
radio
yeah.
towers. They'll do assassination stuff too, but they're really about. Sometimes they'll just take. They're in with mainly a camera to gather
Yeah.
intel, right? Recon guys. But
Yeah. My uncle was in Nam twice. He was drafted into Nam, and then he went back in place of his brother because his brother was drafted, and you could do that if you were already in. He was still in technically.
oh, really?
So
Okay.
yeah, he went back in place of his brother, and the second time when he went back, he was a Marine. But for whatever reason, they had him go through basically what was Green Beret training. Now they didn't call it that; he wasn't a Green Beret, but it was Green Beret trainers. It was all the same stuff. And he even said there was one group of men they just didn't even look at, and it was Forest Recon Marines. Wouldn't
Oh
even
yeah.
wouldn't even
Don't
think to
don't
talk to them.
don't
Yeah,
mess with them. Yeah, yeah. Don't
yeah.
mess a marine in general. I mean,
Especially not a Forest Recon Marine. Just give
no.
him a wide berth. He said.
Yeah. Well, they do those kind of. I mean, because he was talking nonchalantly about it. He's probably been in country longer than that. I'd imagine it
Yeah,
wasn't this. This was the worst experience. He didn't even talk like that. It was just me. My reaction was because I understand. I mean, I've done plenty of stuff in the woods, and I've done a lot of that kind of stuff. 13 days with no resupply. Damn, dude, that's
yeah, that's
rough,
rough.
man. Yeah,
I mean,
but
most people in the modern world couldn't even make it a week without something. Without they'd
yeah,
have to have something store bought or whatever because they just don't. We don't. Most people don't have the survival skills. They just don't know what to do.
yeah. And especially because it's not like they humped in. It's a halo drop. So all they have is their jump pack.
Yep.
They don't have a full set of gear. I mean, those guys are impressive, no matter what country or branch they're from. It's those guys are impressive. Anyway, let's continue on though, because this is interesting little headline. I thought.
Indeed. Let's see what we got here. Charles Scholl's illustrated comic book from 1947 predicted the current disastrous state of modern day America. Interesting.
Now, first things first, I understand the Mandela effect thing that's going on here, that his name is Schultz, not Scholes. But I'm kind of curious, and my generation has, just to, devil's advocate, if we did not somehow confuse Mr. Peanuts with Schultz from Hogan's Heroes. I'm kind of wondering if our brains kind of did that. You know what I mean?
Could
But,
be.
well, what have you. Of course, this is the guy that did Snoopy, if you don't know, in the Peanuts gang. And He's what he became famous for, but he did comic books as well. And this one right here is talking about a future state. Is this tomorrow? And in here, you look at some of these things. It's talking about war and starvation, and is talking about these communists and their plans to disrupt things, and their plans to break down energy systems and all this kind of stuff. And of course, the reason why they put this article in here is because, well, that's exactly what the Democrats are doing right now. They're trying to destabilize the country.
Yeah.
And this is instead of Biden, it's Jones, but that's just a generic name, isn't it? But Now, of course, the reality is many people created comics like this, especially during the early years of the Cold War, and everyone's Red Panic and all that stuff that was going on. So there's a lot of stories like this. This is not unique. It's just interesting to me that how accurate this was to what's actually going on, for one, and two, that it's coming from Charles Scholes. you know, you just wouldn't imagine this kind of thing coming out of him because he's famous for, peanuts.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of that though. Like Disney
There
had a
is.
whole bunch of political cartoons as
Yeah.
well, especially during World War II. Um, Good rebranding, let's put it that way. And also, I mean, he's not wrong. It is interesting how many very insightful men ended up making children's material. Wonder why that could be.
Well, yeah. insight, I would say. But look at
Mm.
the little one. This last panel here is basically he even predicted abortion on demand.
Yep.
Look at that.
They were already doing that in Russia, if I remember correctly, for a while, and they definitely were doing it in China at this time. Um, in fact, they were demanding it, so they weren't just doing it on demand. The government was literally commanding it in
Right.
China.
Oh no, no, China and other places as well. There's actually a lot of very sad documentaries about the amount of women who were forced sterilized in China.
Yep.
But I even love this little line right here. The Other Wife is a movie here. It says class conflict and the breakdown of the bourgeois morals have been handled very well by our people in Hollywood. Just the
Mhm.
breaking down of morality, which they've done that too. It's quite insightful. And it just shows you what people were thinking. And it looks the people that are making trouble once again, these socialists, they're the ones that are being racist in this panel here.
Of course, they always were.
Yeah, in
We
other
need,
places, the red plan was white against black, and this is
yeah,
from 1947, guys.
of course. That was always the plan. That's been the point of it since pretty much day one. Um, and it's worked all over the world. That's why they do it. Like it worked in Russia. It wasn't white against black. It was class based, but it was also race based. It was there was certain I can't remember what they were called. Certain groups of Russians that were still very much Russians, but they were considered lesser than and effectively genocided more than one occasion, purged by differing, not just Stalin, by others as well, because they were, they weren't considered good communists or whatever the excuse was.
Sure.
And it's always been about that. It's about really all it's about is power, scapegoats, and envy.
Yeah,
That's
power
it.
power through fear. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Adrian's making the joke. Hasn't anyone told you comics have always been political? Of course they have. But the difference is that from today is in this comic, as you can see, they're not telling me, they're not preaching to me, they're showing me.
correct.
Right? And that's how you do that. That's the rule of storytelling. There's nothing wrong with politics and stories or comics, not at all.
I mean, Rick, we were just talking about Dune. My lord,
That
the
is
the
all
political
political.
messaging.
Game
Yeah,
of
it's full of it.
Thrones. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? It's is as usual. And Adrian's obviously just joking. We're not
Yeah, of
coming at
course.
Adrian. He knows what we're talking about. Um, that line that they use is a straw man. No one is saying, or some people might say that, but they're saying it as a reaction. What they actually mean is they don't want propaganda in their comics. They don't want to feel like they're being proselytized.
Yeah.
They just want simple moral stories. And when this here, you could even say, well, this was proselytizing. Yeah, it was. And
Yeah.
guess why he wasn't famous for it? Because it sucks. That's why. I mean, it's probably decent, probably a lot better than most of the stuff we get today. But compared to Charlie Brown, what's far more endearing and timeless? What
Yeah,
got him?
sure.
What got him over? What got him fame and fortune and everything? Charlie Brown did. You know why? Because it's simple moral stories. That's why.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And a lot of people were doing this red panic thing back in the day. But once again, whether you like if you want stuff that's completely unpolitical, like say Charlie Brown,
Yes.
which is fine. But in this case, at least they are showing, not telling. You know, I
Correct.
just thought it was interesting. I never knew that Charles Schulz did this. It's interesting. Anyway, let's move
It is.
on to
I
Cool
think it was
Americans.
called. I think it was the kulaks. Is who I'm thinking of in Russia. They were treated very poorly in
Oh, a lot
Russia.
of people. Yeah, no, there's
The
always
Soviet
some
Russia.
scapegoat. It's always a
Yep.
scapegoat. But anyway, let's continue on with more Cool Americans.
I do like Stone Cold. I do like Stone Cold.
He's cool. He is Cool American.
Here's what I like about Stone Cold is I don't think at all he would be considered. Well, now he would nowadays probably, but in reality, he's not what a traditional conservative is. He was very much for pro. He's pro gay marriage. He always has been. He was very vocal about that even back when he was famous.
Hmm.
He's always, he's obviously not like a Bible believing Christian or anything like that, right? He's not the traditional, I guess you could say, stereotype of a conservative Christian. He's very much not that. But that doesn't mean he's lost sanity. And the man is
No.
still, believe it or not, this guy who got famous for beating people up, fake beating people up, is actually a very rational person. When you actually hear the reasons he believes the things he does, which he doesn't put them out there very often, but occasionally you'll get tidbits of it, especially if you listen to his podcast. Um, he almost always makes sense. And even if I disagree with him, at least his he has a line of thinking that's obvious. You don't get to be as famous as him and be a complete idiot. That's just that simple. There's very few exceptions to that rule. There are some exceptions, but not, especially not in the profession he was in, where it's live, constant performing. When you're out there, like, you have to be sharp to be able to
Yeah.
get.
Well,
Especially, he got bigger than anybody ever, so there's a reason for that. And he's college educated and stuff. He has a, he had a full ride football scholarship to one of the Texas colleges. I can't remember which one. And so he's not a dumb guy. People would assume that, or you wouldn't look to Stone Cold as being somebody with great intellect, but he actually is very insightful. And I think a lot of his time as a wrestler, and traveling is a big one. Traveling changes your worldview a lot.
it does. Yeah.
Helped him become more insightful. And he's made some mistakes in his life. He's been arrested and all kinds of nonsense. Um, and this to me wasn't surprising at all. A lot of people were probably like it says triggers Joe Biden supporters. I don't know why that would surprise you that he doesn't like Joe Biden.
Yeah, why
He
would
didn't
he?
really.
No one
He
does.
wasn't even a big fan of Trump either. But I mean, for Christ's sake, Biden's an embarrassment. I don't
Yeah.
care if you're a big anti-Trump guy. I'm not a pro-Trump guy. Believe it or not, never voted for him. But you cannot look at Joe Biden and say that he's not an embarrassment objectively. He's
Well,
embarrassing to
he
the American
literally
people.
shat his pants in Rome the other day. Literally.
Yes.
I mean, that's
Yes.
our president. But I think one of the reasons that Steve had success is because his character is not too dissimilar than himself. I mean, he's a beer swilling, hard ass redneck. I mean, that's what he is. That's who he is. And that's nothing wrong with that.
Funny thing is he actually, from his podcast, he actually prefers whiskey. But still, the
But
point stands.
it stands. He is what he is, and I think that's why he was able to do the character so well.
Yeah.
Where someone like the Undertaker is also exactly like that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
who he is, Calloway. But he had to play this Undertaker character for a long time, who is not who he is.
Right.
But he did it well, though. But I think for Steve, it was a bit easier because he was kind of just being himself, right?
Yes. Just a
You know,
little edgier. He
a
even says
a
that. He
little.
said it just turned himself up to 11, and there was his character. Because he was angry, he was bitter at the powers that be in the wrestling business for a long time because he felt like he should have been, and he wasn't wrong, like he should have been bigger than he was, and he was being screwed with, and he wasn't wrong, and he turned that anger into probably the greatest character in wrestling history besides maybe the Undertaker, and made more money than anybody's ever done in that, especially in that amount of time.
Yeah, no, he was the biggest
So
success. That's true. But I think one of the problems that wrestling has in general is that we know it's basically you're an actor, right? You're a physical
yes,
actor, and you need to have both sides. You have to have the mic side and the ring side, right?
yeah,
To be a complete package. Even something like Hulk Hogan, who is nowhere near the greatest wrestler, he was
no,
entertaining in the ring, though, right?
yes,
You need these things, and the problem is basically, therefore, they're actors, but they don't have the protection that say actors would have with the actors union in whatever they call that in Hollywood. They don't
SAG,
have
Screen
this.
Actors Guild.
Yeah, there it is. They don't have that. So you have a lot of corruption in the upper echelon management of wrestling, and there's no protective line, and a lot of shenanigans go on, dude. A lot of shenanigans. I mean, you had and this literally happened. That guy who Hulk Hogan was working for at that other wrestling group before he came over and he had that big match with Andre the Giant, and
Mm-hmm.
ended up becoming Hulk Hogan, right?
Oh yeah,
But that guy literally, I can't remember the wrestler's name, the Sheik, the Iron Sheik, and
oh yeah,
he was trying to pay him a ton of money to break Hulk Hogan's leg, actually
yeah.
break him. And this is not bullshit story either. I know a lot of bullshit comes out of wrestling, but it's not. And the Sheik was like, "No, nah, I'm not doing that." And he went and he told Vince McMahon, what was going on. I mean, this is kind
Mm-hmm.
of the dirty, dark stuff that goes behind the scenes because there's no regulation whatsoever.
And the Sheik could have done that. Let's be
Oh yeah,
clear.
let's be
He was
clear.
a
Yeah,
world class actual wrestler from
he's a real
Iran.
real guy. Yeah.
Easily could have done it, and he's just like, nah, I'm not doing that to him.
Well, because the
That's not
McMahons
right.
no, it went right, and the McMahons were good to him and stuff. There's no reason for that. I'm just saying, I
Yeah.
think this is why there's so many of this stuff, like with him not being happy with that, because there's no accountability where in Hollywood there
Yes.
needs to be, and we're gonna get to accountability here in a minute. But yeah, you get him, Steve. Get their asses, dude. This one is just dumb.
Nubia and the Amazons writer canonizes existence of trans Amazons on Themyscira. Well, okay, we have the answer how they have babies.
They don't have babies. The DC version. All of them are immortal or ageless, right?
Oh my gosh,
It's
that's
so
amazing.
stupid. And once again, this kind of falls a little bit, just slightly, into the Thor idea, right? Now, to be fair, Marvel's
Yes.
Thor is much closer to canon than the Amazons are. Let's be fair.
Mm,
However, you are dealing with a real life thing in a way.
hmm
And you're also disrespecting it because here's the thing about Amazons and Wonder Woman herself. Keep in mind, Wonder Woman has always been, from day one, a feminist icon. Always, right?
Yes.
She's never not been. She is a feminist icon. And the Amazons themselves have been something that women and feminist women have embraced for a very long time. It's something that they identify with as strong female, and that's fine. Let them do that. And but yet you're going to take that away somehow? Why? Now, you and I could sit here and say that, well, it's all noisy shit that, these women, I'm a strong Amazon and they'll actually cosplay in real life.
Mm.
We can have a chuckle at it. However, what are you doing? Why would you do that?
Because they secretly hate women.
It seems so. It seems
It's
so.
it's funny to me. I was actually saying this to someone else the other day that it's shocking to me to watch these so-called progressives, these woke tards as we like to call them, wokies. They're effectively now they have different rhetoric and they have different reasons, stated reasons for why they want the things they want, but there's functionally no difference between them and 90s hardcore Republicans.
Yeah,
Think about it. They want everything censored because of their own personal beliefs and feelings.
yeah,
They want women to cover up, right? Because we can't have men gazing upon them.
yeah.
Except if they're whores. That's fine for some reason. That's a weird
I
caveat, but
guess.
whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go down the list the way they but treat women, the way they want men to treat women is completely antithetical to the way men should treat women, like women,
Yeah,
like
no,
people.
and there's this happy medium that we seem to be missing, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, this is just stupid, and it's rude. It's just rude.
it'd be like if they made like if the '90s conservatives made Wonder Woman a devout Catholic, right? Like, just
Yeah,
what? That doesn't make any sense. She's an Amazon.
yeah. Well, she has actually always been portrayed quite wholesome. She's
Yes.
not, this is not your third or fourth wave feminist here. This is more of your kind of first wave type of feminist.
Mm.
But whatever. It's just rude. That's all.
Well, the other thing about Wonder Woman is even though she was a girl power icon and still
Yeah,
is, and rightfully so, um, she was at least a woman. She was feminine and carried herself like a feminine woman, at least until recently, where she's become much more of a warlord, I would say, which I don't like. But for most of her run, she was still very feminine, and she had grace. That's the important thing. And you can be about female empowerment, right? Making the girls, let's go girls, and still be a girl. You
yeah.
don't have to
Well,
pretend to be a man and come out all masculine and her. Like
well,
you're gonna show those boys. Okay,
yeah.
show
No.
us.
Until the past decade or two, Wonder Woman was the level-headed one, right? She didn't overreact, right? She'd always think first, whereas Batman sometimes would, he always has a plan, but Batman sometimes would over plan, right? Whereas Superman sometimes could just react. He always did the right thing, but he maybe be a little hot-headed about it, right? Wonder Woman never lost her shit, but recently
Yeah,
she's like you
the
said,
opposite.
she's just the opposite of what she was. But
Yeah,
whatever, this is just nonsense. It's rude. Moving on.
that's effectively what they've turned her into, is the opposite of what she used to be.
Yeah, which is what
Ah,
they do.
yes. Yes, 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 yes. I'm not Rust Armorer, that issue statement after Alec Baldwin killed Miss, I'm just going to call her Miss Hutchins, on the film set, because some of these names are silly. Now the one
It's
lady's
just
like Russian or
Helena.
something.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just Helena.
if you
But
say so.
yeah, okay. But anyway, this is very interesting because if you've been, I got a couple articles here regarding this situation, because it's you would think this would have been swept under the rug real quick, but every day we get more and more crazy insanity coming out of this story. The what was going on that set was really bad. It was really, really bad. And this child should not have been in charge of anything, and this drunk shouldn't have had anything to do with it. But listen to what this girl, well, her lawyer, I would say, says. This is interesting here. First, Hannah would like. This is from her lawyer, I'm sure. First, Hannah would like to extend her deepest and most sincere condolences to the family and friends of Helena. She was an inspirational woman in the film. Was she? Who Hannah looked up to. Did she? I doubt that. A 24-4 millennial, probably identified as a lesbian with purple pink hair. I don't think she looked up to anybody. She also offers her thoughts and prayers for a speedy recovery. To Joel, the director, who was also injured. Hannah is devastated and completely beside herself over the events that have transpired. Now, I would normally just say and believe it because you think you would be. I bet you Alec Baldwin's beside himself with it. I bet you he is. But the thing is, if you listen to the way this girl speaks and you see some of the comments she's made, I don't think she's beside herself at all.
No, she isn't.
Right?
She don't care.
She should be, but she's not because it goes on.
She should be in prison.
Maybe she will be. But other than these nice happy words that she puts here, she has a because she wants to set the record straight. You see, okay. Some untruths that have been told to the media. She would like to address some untruths that have been told to the media, which have falsely portrayed her and slandered her. Oh, safety is Hannah's number one priority on set. Ultimately, this set would never have been compromised if live animal were not introduced. Well, why do they find live animal loose all over the place?
Hmm.
In packs on
Hundreds of
tables all
rounds.
over the place, right? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Hannah has no idea where the rounds came from. Hannah and the prop master gained control over the guns, and she never witnessed anyone shoot live rounds with these guns, and nor would she permit that. Although you were the one handing out ammo to do it, everyone else says. They were
Hmm.
locked up every night and at lunch, and there's no way a single one of them was unaccounted for or being shot by the crew members. But clearly that's not true. Now listen to how quickly this shifts, dude. This is amazing. Hannah still to this day has never had an accidental discharge. The first one on this set. Okay, hold on. Hannah still to this day has never
Ah,
had an accidental
ah!
discharge. The first one on this set. Now hold on. How if she still to this day has never had, then how is there a first one implying second ones and possibly more? We
Yeah,
know that Nick Cage was absolutely pissed, demanding they fire her ass because of her nonsense and unprofessionalism with guns. And we know Nick Cage is a wild man. So if you
yeah.
pissed off Nick Cage,
I
I
think
mean,
he's wild, but he also seems to be at least a fairly decent professional
no, I
when
think
he's
he
on
is,
set.
but I mean, he's not like a sensitive,
No,
Daisy.
no.
But anyway, the first one on this set was the prop master, and the second was a stunt man after Hannah informed him his gun was hot with blanks, the statement asserted. Well, you didn't write this statement very well, Mr. or Mrs. Lawyer.
Mm,
The statement then claims Reed was working two jobs on the set and made it difficult to focus on being the armor, with blame being put on the production company. So she did nothing wrong. She's very sorry it all bad happened. She was not at fault at all, but yet excuses. Excuses. I mean, god damn, you would think a lawyer would be able to write something better, right?
mm,
And maybe this is an agent put this out. I don't know, because if I was advising her and I was going to write this, I guarantee you none of this would be in here. Hannah was hired on two positions of this film, which made yeah. So she fought for training, days to maintain weapons, and proper time to prepare for gunfire, but ultimately was overruled by production in her department. That could be true. The whole production set, we know that it was an absolutely insane production set. The whole
mm-hmm,
production set became unsafe due to various factors, including lack of safety meetings. This was not the fault of Hannah. Why no? Why wouldn't it be? You're the armorer master. It is
mm,
100% your responsibility. And this is another problem of having a child in charge of such things. That child doesn't have the authority to stand up and say, no, we're doing this, or you're not doing this. See, if someone like you or I were on the set and we were given that authority, I
yep.
guarantee you that they're not going to tell me no,
Oh, I
because
guarantee you, anybody who brings a live round on that's leaving it with their leg. That's what I guarantee you. There's no reason a live round needs to be on a set.
well, I'm
Period.
just, you know
I
what I
don't care.
mean. It's because we're older, and it's like,
Yeah,
no, this is my job. I have actual law behind me. We're not doing this. And if you got to fire
yeah,
me, you go right ahead and fire me, and I'll sue your ass. But she's a child; she has no pushback. They hired
correct.
her because she's a kid, she's cheap, and they can manipulate her. I don't think this is probably true. I don't have any problems with this aspect, but it just goes on. But the thing with it is, that's a horrible statement put out by this girl's handler.
Yes.
All the noise that's coming out shows that it was an absolute loony bin on that set. There was a lot of nonsense going on, and you are, Miss Hannah Gutierrez Reed, 100% culpable. 100%. Now, should other people, like, say, the producer, Alec Baldwin, or the director be held responsible as too? Maybe,
Yep.
but you're
Yep.
definitely responsible. So, whatever.
Anybody who touched that firearm with a live round in it and did not check it should
Yep.
be held to some level of culpability, up to and including uh, criminal
Yeah,
prosecution.
absolutely. Now here, look at this headline though. Now this is interesting, dude. Boom. Look at that, dude. Look at that. Look at that.
Oh boy. I want to say one thing about that last thing. You noticed that they kept calling her Hannah, this prepared statement, strictly because they know her last name is an abomination, and a lot of people don't like when you when you address somebody solely by their last name, like they do in legal documents a lot,
Hmm.
and second, or in legal statements, and second, a lot of people don't like the hyphen. It just is like this weird cultural trigger for people, and they'll just instantly, be uninterested in that. So what they did is they know that if they use a first name, well, men especially, her name's Hannah. That's instantly going to trigger protectiveness, right, in a
Endearment.
man.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep,
Yep.
that's why they did that. Anyway, Adam Baldwin weighs in on the tragic shooting on the set of Rust, suggests Alec Baldwin should man up, confess, and throw himself on the mercy of the court. Now, Adam
Damn.
Baldwin is not related to Alec Baldwin except for like distant cousins or something.
Yeah, they're
But
cousins. They're cousins. Yeah.
but I wholeheartedly agree with him. I think if he showed that level of contrition, I would say okay, unless some other malice is found, then fine. Let it. He could get maybe a minimum slap on the wrist and move on with his life. But since he won't, I think he should be brought before a judge.
Well,
Personally,
I don't know that he won't, because Alec has not put out much comment, really. And if you see his reaction after it happened, it was genuine, dude. I'm guarantee you, he's besides himself with this.
good.
And good. He should be. You're right. I just thought that's right in your face, dude. You get him, Adam.
Yeah.
You get him, dude.
No,
Right?
he's right.
He is right.
Alec should be a human being. Stop being a weird Trump parody. and just be a human being and own it. At the end of the day, he was handed a live gun. Now, he shouldn't have been handed a live gun, but he should have checked it too. And he
Yeah,
knows
no,
that.
that's actually the procedure.
Yes.
I already knew these things because I've watched documentaries on stuff, and I'm sure many of you have as well. But one thing
Yes.
that's been very good about it is recently all of these little news reports, documentaries, things like that have been popping up where people showing you the process of guns on set.
Yep.
And it's very stringent and it's very universal.
Yep.
There's no way that she should it's not that you hand him a gun and say cold or hot. You
Right.
show him it's cold or hot, and then he has to show you that he sees it before the scene can move forward. It's very stringent and it's universal. So that's a
Plus, if
good
he
thing.
wants me to take him seriously about his anti gun positions that he has many of, then I want him to come out and demand that SAG's standards get even more strict, and that if you're going to be in a film where you're going to handle a firearm, you have to be trained.
I don't mind that.
I
I
don't
don't
think
mind that.
that's unreasonable, and that way maybe you can't use the excuse of, "Oh, I didn't know I was supposed to check a gun that's handed to me," because some people maybe they don't know that. But anybody listen to me who's never been around firearms, rule number one: if you did not check the loaded status of a gun, it is loaded.
Yeah.
Period. That
No,
is how you always assume it is.
that's
It
how we're
doesn't
taught.
matter if
Yeah.
Santa Claus gave it to you. If somebody hands you a firearm and says it's not loaded, you check it. Period.
You notice how it makes the gun people like us most angry?
Yeah.
Because we know how to handle guns, we know what the rules, we've been raised and taught the proper way, and and many other, and not just us, many other people coming out, we're a bit irate, not
Yep.
just because of this idiot who's always talking about guns and then he's the one that actually murders someone. Yeah.
Hmm.
Beyond that, it's that we know that with simple training this shit wouldn't go on.
Correct.
Right? And you got places, keep in mind, you got places like Chicago. There was a story just came out where Chicago and that Lightfoot bitch over there, she, this
Sorry, that caught me off guard. I wasn't ready for it.
zombie lady, uh, she's so desperate to lower her homicide rates that basically what they're doing is if you get in a fight or someone gets killed, they're doing everything they can to make it a misdemeanor. Right? We had an
Yeah.
example of these two boys were fighting. One boy's got a knife, the other one doesn't. The other boy without the knife died, of course. All they did was put misdemeanor charges of inappropriate use of a weapon on the boy, when it clearly
Wow.
was. You can watch the video; it was clearly murder. And But they're doing that with guns and stuff too. There's no training going on. There's no open conversation about what's right and what's wrong. And in amongst this miasma of insanity, you got jagoffs like Alec Baldwin actually killing someone, and I guarantee you he's going to get away with it. I guarantee
Of
it.
course.
Yeah,
Of course.
but
I
oh,
don't think he should though. I think he should be held to at least negligence charges at minimum.
you would
Minimum,
think.
because he's a producer. He's the most experienced person on that set. Most likely, he's been in so many movies where he's had to handle firearms. He knew better.
Yeah, but
Point blank. Period.
he's a golden boy.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Old Piersy
Piers
here.
Morgan, oh boy, old Piersy. He has some of the best gun takes. Says that the more information is revealed about the Alec Baldwin shooting incident, the more culpable, quote, the more culpable he looks for being executive producer of a chaotic, dangerous shit show. Hey, Piers, it took you like 35 years in public discourse, but you finally had a good take. Good
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. But he is right. He is 100%
He is
right
right.
because every day it gets uglier. I mean, it's insane. This girl has had trouble before.
Yeah.
Right? She clearly wasn't vetted. So it's this is interesting because I didn't expect to see more about it out of the first story. I figured they'd squash it and spin it and it would be done. But there's so many people with an opinion coming out of the closet, particularly in Hollywood. And I think what's happening is it's just my opinion. You tell me what you think, but I feel there's a lot of people in Hollywood who are normal people, and they've been oppressed in a way, threatened. If they do say or do the wrong thing, they can't get work, and they just kind of been quiet and just kind of went along to get along, right? But I feel
Yeah.
like some of them are just at they've had enough. and they're just starting to speak out, like Adam, because you know that's going to hurt his career. Him coming
Oh
out
yeah.
and speaking to the Golden Boy, he like that.
Well,
It's going to
luckily
hurt him.
for him, his career's already been kind of tanked
That's
out
true. That
anyway
is true. But you know
because
what I'm
he was
saying?
in support of he was one of the first at the time relatively known celebrities, maybe the only one actually, who was in support of Gamergate. Way back in the day. Like he was in on it because he's apparently a video, he plays games,
Yeah.
and he saw this nonsense. He's like, "What the hell? Like, what are these journalists saying about us?"
Well,
Um,
because that was all a lie, though. That was just a full-on lie, and that's why people get so angry about it. But
well, and then yeah, but that he got a lot of flack for that, and was one of the first people canceled, quote unquote, because of it. And since then, he has just not cared. He just says what he thinks, and that's pretty much the end of it. I'm sure. I mean, he still gets work. He still does, certain. I'm assuming they're like Christian movies or whatever, but he did still get that. But whatever, he's working. That's what matters. And I don't think he's too worried about it. But if it was before then, you'd be absolutely correct. And there's been a couple other people pretty, versed in the ins and outs of the industry. Some of which who are prop masters who have made statements saying
yep.
there's no way this should even be possible to happen. The amount of negligence is beyond anything they could even imagine. One of them said, I don't even understand how that happens. I don't even fathom it. So we'll see. I think, there was reports that the county that it was in was looking into criminal charges, uh, and they're investigating whether or not
Yeah.
that's a way to go. I doubt it will happen, but it should. Somebody should be made something
Well,
because someone's
that
life's over for
that
something that
girl
absolutely shouldn't have happened.
that girl will get hung out to dry for sure. But I seriously doubt anything will happen to him other than a slap on the wrist at best.
Yep.
Roger says, "Do you think this adds more fuel to the fire for Biden to take away our guns?" No, because it's the wrong color.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, no. You haven't seen any screams of banning guns from this because it's not a white man killing a black man, right? That's the end of it. But
Yep.
anyway, so that's the stories I had for today. I wanted to talk a little bit about Halloween, if I may.
So
I'm
while
not going
you
to
do
get into
that, I'm gonna go help my wife with something. I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm not going to get into a huge TFT dissertation today. I'm not going to do that. Although I do want to do a full-on thing with TFT like we did with the last Bible one, which I thought was pretty good. It was that 5 or 6 part series, and I thought that was a lot of fun. It was interesting information. But the Halloween thing, I want to just kind of cover the general idea of it. And I know today the way we celebrate Halloween is very commercial and very secular, and that's fine. Actually, I like the fact that that's that way because everybody can enjoy it. There's no strings attached. However, this is, I guess, the Christians would call it a pagan holiday, although it's not pagan. They were, I don't know if you know this, but the pagans were a people. Anyway, but this celebration has been going on for thousands of years, and we don't know how deep it goes, just like many things. If you look at, say, Christmas, the idea of the 3 days and the Christmas tree and all that stuff, we have evidence that that goes as far back to the Neanderthals. I mean, so who knows how deep these holidays really, really go. But the thing is, I know Halloween these days has very much an Irish theme to it. Not even British, just Irish. But the thing is, it's not. It's way older than that. Now, we can make an argument that recent evidence over the past 10, 15 years is showing that Ireland might be one of the oldest places we know of right now. But that aside, we know that we have this celebration going back to Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, Southeast Asia, China, Japan, South America. This was part of that widespread culture that was all over the world. We have cultural evidence and we have architectural evidence, right? This whatever this culture was, whoever they were, these Cyclopean builders, their buildings techniques were quite amazing with stone, and we found their structures all over the world. And this culture, this is part of their culture, I think. But we can at least track it back to the Mesopotamian and Egyptians. And The interesting thing about this, you might not understand the connection because a lot of times when we think about Halloween, we think about scary things and such. But actually, another element of Halloween you might not have recognized is the romantic element, right? Keep in mind that the ancient peoples based a lot of their celebrations and various things off of astrology, right? They did this because, wonder and trying to understand the world, possibly. But also, it had a lot to do with farming, right? And navigation. These were very important things. Understand what a temple or a church or all these things. If you go look at the etymology of these words, you got to find that they're not what you think they are. They're not religious meanings. They're actually means a place where time is kept is what they are. They're timekeeper places. And that has to do with navigation. And back in those days, if you could navigate quicker and safer, you'd make more money. So it was something that was controlled by the authority, whoever it may have been, which is why those things were kept so tight at that time. But It's all related into this astrological stuff, whether it be navigation or farming. The interesting thing about the romance aspect of Halloween is a lot of people have forgotten it, but it is a major part of it. And here's the interesting thing: if you look at the stellar alignment and the kind of harvest time with Halloween, which actually would have been more on the 28th or 30th. Rather than the 31st, it kind of become solidified in that later by the Catholics. But nevertheless, there's another date throughout the year that has the same kind of stellar alignment and type of uh, astrological lineups, as does Halloween or Samhain or Samhain, and that would be Valentine's Day. And I think a lot of people don't understand the connection between the two. And some people, if you believe in gem magic or gem energy or ley lines or any of that kind of stuff, if you're into that kind of stuff, it's felt that the energy of the planet at those times are romantic. Now I don't know anything about that stuff. I don't really get into that, but it is interesting that is something that's part of Halloween that I think we've completely forgot. Another thing is as you see with this picture I have here, the reason I'm showing this picture is because another thing we don't do anymore. That all the old celebrations of someone, it has different names around the world, still do this aspect of it. And I'm going to show you some of the things that they used to do with Samhain that we don't do anymore. Here in Japan, they have Obon, for instance, China as well, Southeast Asia. They all celebrate the Buddhism, right? And that's a Buddhist tradition, but it's coming from the animistic traditions of the past. This circle dance around a fire is something we don't do anymore. People don't even know. We have our masquerade balls, so there is dancing still. But it was an important part. And if you look at Japan, which is an interesting place, or just Asia, it's interesting because it's a place where the ancient and the new exist right next to each other. And in the West, we've kind of gotten rid of our ancient. It's kind of gone. It's become Hollywood movies now. It's not part of our life, really, right? But here in Asia, the ancient and the new are right next to each other and they coexist quite easily. Right. So now this I'm going to come over here to this article right here. Now this is very new wave, new religion, new Druidism, new Wicca type of stuff. So it's a little bit flaky, artsy, fartsy, hippie type of stuff, to be fair. But they're trying to recreate something. And I think they've gotten some things accurate and some things not. So let's look at some of the things that you would had traditionally done at a Samhain ritual. Now, Some of these could be put together. They've separated them out, but they really shouldn't have. But Samhain Nature Walk and set up a Samhain altar, and also this other one here, make an ancestral ancestor altar and guide the spirits. All of those visit cemetery. All those things would be really one thing. They're all really together, because what they traditionally would do was they would go to the graveyards or the grave areas, and they would it was a time of year to clean it up, right? So they go and they'd sweep them out and make sure it looked good. And they would just take a day during the daytime, and they would make sure that everything was nice and neat. It was just kind of a cleanup for that. And they would also do give offerings and ceremonies and prayers at the graveside, and they would do all these kind of things. And then at nighttime, they would carry lanterns. Or gourds at that time, or pumpkins today, and they would guide the spirits to sacred groves, was the idea. Because later, as we fell into some difficult times, the inception of what we do today happened, and I'll get to that in a minute. Of course, Sam Haines ceremonies involve preparing meals, eating together certain types of foods, harvest type of foods, and of course, offerings to your ancestors as well. Because keep in mind that animistic religions of the past were very much ancestor worship type of things. So they would do this kind of stuff. They would have times where they communicate with the dead as far as seances go. They would also have moments of just quiet. They would take in the morning of they would actually sit and be very quiet for like an hour and just try to reflect on the year, because keep in mind this is harvest time and they're about to come into a hard difficult era, which would involve winter, which was deadly at that time. I'm sorry, Roger, there were no orgies involved. That's Christmas. I do apologize. Anyway, bonfires, of course. And the reason they did these things because at this time, and also at the Beltane time, which is we call Valentine's today, they believe that the wall, the veil between our world and the spirit world was very thin, and these spirits could come through. Now, it's not just ghosts of your ancestors; it also could be demons, or Alfir, elves, or Ishi, or any kind of other beings. And the fire was set up to try to focus the spirit's attention away from the homes, which once again led into some things that happened later, which I'll get to in a minute. And of course, they'd have prayers and invocations, and all kind of things like that would go on. And these modern, Wicca or Druidism that's going on here that they're doing, it's fine. They're enjoying themselves, and they've kind of recreated it somewhat accurately. What I want to get into is how things changed a long time ago. Not recently, a very long time ago. And it's argued why these things changed. And I think it has had something to do with the cycle of cataclysm we have on this planet. Every 400 years, we have problems. It's just I don't. It seems to be solar in nature. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to get into speculation, but every 400 years we have problems. If you go back from, we're about 30 years away from that mark, by the way. But if you go back 400 years, every time, and you look in history, you're going to see a time of disaster and cataclysm, upheaval, etc. It's uncanny, and it's quite trackable. And I think there was probably a real big bang that they had a really bad, because it's not always that bad, but it's always troublesome. And they had a really bad event, I think, and it threw people into a bit of a dark age, which always happens when this goes on. There's a little bit of backstepping when this 400-year cycle happens, this solar cycle. And I think they became very fearful, because if you go back to the old Egyptian, or Mesopotamia, or Indian, or even the Asian ones, it's a positive event, right? They're not afraid of the ancestors coming back. Matter of fact, they're welcoming, they're guiding them into the town center. Now, what happened up in with the Celtic peoples, in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales and stuff like that, things shifted. And of course, that brought us to where we have today. And they were no longer welcoming the ancestors home. They became fearful. And they believed that all spirits, no matter whether it's your ancestor or not, were dangerous. So their practices of the ancient ceremony changed. They would do their dance around the bonfire. They did, but they started wearing scary costumes because they wanted to scare away the spirits. They would take gourds and carve scary faces in them and put them as the lanterns in the windows. And they would also wear them around a belt because keep in mind a gourd is much smaller than a pumpkin, in order to scare them away. The families would stay awake all night in dread in the dark of the house, hoping no spirit would come in and attack them. Occasionally throughout the night, because the men are the ones out dancing, protecting the town, trying to scare these spirits away. Occasionally they come and they would knock on the door, and they would get a drink or a piece of bread to keep up because they're dancing the whole night. And of course, as time went by and as their superstitions became more and more ceremonial and less real to them, Samhain became more like Christmas, and eventually the fear went away. They started getting kids involved in the ceremonies, and as time went by, it became what we see now. Now it's completely the kids are doing it. The kids are out dancing in a way. They're walking down the streets in their scary costumes. They're knocking on the doors for their trick or treats. And just like with Christmas, Christmas was a very serious holiday because it was during a time in winter when they could easily die and they were desperate, so the whole Yule log was dragged into the longhouse to keep them alive. To they were all living in one building, and the fire would rage, and they were just trying to survive the dead cold of the worst part of winter. And the evergreen represented the coming spring and eternal life, etc., etc. But over time, where they would put on the outside evergreens, they would decorate them, and they would give little gifts for Odin, or Nuada, or what have you, depending on your region. Those gifts became bigger and bigger, and they started giving them to the kids. And they became too heavy, where they would sit at the bottom of the tree instead of on the branches of the tree. And over time, it became a fun holiday for kids instead of the very, very, very serious stuff that was going on in the beginning. Now, I don't know where the shift came from. No one really does. I think it's if you look at the time frame, I think it's related to one of those 400-year cycles. Because, like I said, every time it happens, there's always trouble. The last one we had was a lot of trouble 400 years ago. We had a mini ice age. You guys have all heard about it. And you got 70 years of really bad winter, not a lot of food being produced. It was very, very harsh and troublesome. And sometimes these 400-year cycles are much worse because what they do is they produce this sun event produces a lot of earthquakes. And you can see the past 30 years we've been building up to it, right? The earthquakes get worse and worse and worse and worse. We have more now. It's just ridiculous, tens of thousands of earthquakes every year now, right? And it's going to get worse until we hit that 30-year mark here, and then it'll slowly go back down. And sometimes the apex of this solar event will create earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that are so bad that they darken the sky for a year, or they throw us into mini ice ages. It happens, right? And sometimes it's not as bad. Now we always survive, of course, and we're still here. But I think this something really bad happened. And if you go back several thousand years ago, one of these events, we don't have a lot of information, but some of the information suggests that the entire northern hemisphere, not the southern one, the northern hemisphere was black for years, right? Meaning that you're not growing hardly any food. It's overcast and gray for years. Not there's many examples in history of the year without a sun. This happens a lot.
Mm.
It's all over the world, and it's because there's volcanic ash in the sky, is what they're talking about. But that event was really bad as far as agriculture. It's about the same time that we think this shift happened in the north. in regards to these kind of ceremonies, and I feel it's connected. I don't have proof; it's just my opinion. However, something happened because it shifted from a happy celebration and Oktoberfest, if you'd like, into a very, very desperate situation where they were very seriously trying to protect themselves from something, right? And then over time, it softened and it became what we have today. So maybe I should have turned the TFT music on, huh? Oh well,
Maybe.
I didn't create a big old picture presentation like I usually do. But I don't know how much that you heard, but it is an interesting evolution, right?
Mm,
Because we see evolution of all the old stuff, which were usually quite serious, and they become just celebratory and fun these days, and that's great. But this one with this ancient practice of this, what we call Halloween, is way older than
yeah.
that. And it, for a long time, I mean, thousands of years, it was a happy thing. And then in the north, particularly in the north, in Scandinavia, the British Isles, and Northern Europe, it became a scary thing. Now, today, we only have the remnants of the Irish celebration that we have. But understand that this is worldwide, and the scaring up or the seriousness of it was all across Northern Europe. It wasn't just in Ireland. We just don't have any memory of it left culturally.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened. I'm guessing that it had something to do with that cycle because every 400 years we get we get a lot of earthquake troubles, you know.
Mm.
And it's solar, and we know it's solar in nature now. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Uh, I think it's amazing to me the hubris of man to sit here and say things like the effect of carbon in the atmosphere, that man is causing global warming and climate change, while simultaneously denying the sun, the most powerful force in our solar system. Quite literally, the thing is called the solar system
Yeah,
after the sun, and to deny that its fluctuations and its changes and the things that it does are
yeah,
far more important and more likely to cause dramatic weather and climate changes, including earthquakes.
yeah.
But yet, and they know it because
They
at the
know
other
it.
side of the mouth, they'll talk about it. They'll tell you all about how the sun spots and the solar radiation and the
Oh, they
waves and the
know.
flares and the
Yeah,
has done
it's
changed the
science now.
environment.
Yeah,
And then at the other side of their mouth, they'll talk about how you're bad for owning a car or because you want to eat steak because it's causing global warming. It's amazing to me the amount of mental gymnastics you have to go through to explain some of these things when it's real simple. The sun's doing it, stupid.
yeah.
Every single cycle of warming and cooling, all of them, without question, has happened because of a shift in the sun. Every time.
Hmm.
From the last actual ice age to the mini ice age 500 years ago, every single to now, the reason why our planet's getting a little bit warmer, even though it hasn't for the last 20 years, but yeah, semantics, is because the sun is going through a changing cycle. There's
Yeah,
a reason why all of the planets in the whole solar system got warmer at the same time.
yeah.
Bah,
It's
probably
solar.
we probably did that too. We
Yeah, we
probably did that
probably had
too.
global warming, but no, the science knows, and this is not a conspiracy theory at all. It's
No.
not pseudoscience; it's real science. Matter of fact, there's many channels you can go watch. Just type in space weather probably or solar storms or something like that, and where they
Yep.
track it, and they've got to the point now that they track very clearly every time we have a certain type of electromagnetic release from the sun, we get earthquakes. It's like clockwork almost, right? Hurricanes,
Mm.
weathers, all these kind of things. I mean, what is a hurricane? A hurricane is basically, or typhoon, or whatever you want to call it. It is the Earth desperately trying to dissipate heat from the equator. It's a
Yes.
natural function, and that, of
Yep.
course, is triggered and caused by the sun's position at that time.
Yep.
It's just
That's why it comes in seasons. Oh.
yeah, right. Exactly. But it's cause and effect, right?
Yes.
And we're starting to learn more and more and understand more. And We don't know what causes this big apex trigger because it builds up. It does build up, but then all of a sudden you get a really bad event. It's like the pressure is building and it pops. We don't know that yet because we haven't had the scientific equipment to monitor it, see it, and therefore document it. We will, as it's coming. But I think we're probably in really good position with our technology and stuff we have today. We'll probably weather it pretty well
Yeah.
because if you look at the events in the past, it's always about increased earthquakes and volcanic activity, and we're seeing a lot
hmm
of that already. And I think we'll probably be able to weather it much better than times in the
The only
past.
one we have to, only ones we have to really worry about volcano wise. Regular volcano goes off locally and in the within a few thousand miles. It's a big deal,
Yeah,
but typically globally, we don't even notice it.
no,
At least on the other side of the world, right? But there are big volcanoes out there. There's one here in America that has
yeah,
been
Yellowstone.
dangerously active
It's
for a
been
while.
how many feet has that thing risen over the past 20 years? A lot.
A lot. I know
Yeah,
when I was there, Old Faithful wasn't faithful anymore, and this was 25 years ago.
yeah,
It had stopped being like clockwork. Like, it was called Old Faithful because it was like clockwork. It would always go off at the same time, within the
right.
same interval, every day, every year, without question. And that wasn't the case anymore
Yeah.
because the seismic activity had shifted. So that caldera goes, and America's gone. Bye bye, America.
Well,
Uh,
that would be a very bad event. That's extreme.
yeah,
But
yeah. That's what I'm saying, though. As
yeah,
long as it's not something like that, we'll be fine. I
right.
think at least the vast majority of us will be fine. The human race
Yeah, yeah,
will
yeah,
go
yeah.
on. I
Of
mean,
course it
the
does.
the last ice age, we almost got wiped out according to the science,
Yeah.
the old science, and we still barely by the skin of
Yeah,
our teeth
no,
got through that.
I'm not comparing this 400-year cycle to the 12,000-year cataclysm. They're not
Yeah,
comparable.
which
That's
we're
very
getting
different.
pretty close to that
Yeah,
too.
but I don't think those are related, though. I don't think that didn't
No, I
have
don't either.
anything to do with it. But no, but the interesting thing is when you read the historical documents every 400 years, they're not talking about the earthquake or the volcano, which clearly must have happened. Those aren't even
hmm
mentioned. What they're talking about is the year without sun or it getting very cold for decades. That's what
hmm
always comes up. Is those things are what's remembered, not the volcano or the earthquake, which is interesting. But understand that there's been many, 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 many documentations of a year without sun. It's not
Yep.
just one. The Bible mentions it, right?
Yep.
And people think it's some godly event. No, it happens all the time throughout our
Well,
history.
I mean, could be a godly event, but regardless, it does seem to happen cyclically.
It does.
Um,
Yeah.
there's even mentions in the Bible of times where God goes quiet, which is very similar in feeling, like emotionally, spiritually, to the Jewish people,
Yeah.
Hebrew people. Like the 400 years or whatever it is between the last prophet and Jesus is one of those times where they didn't have any prophets. God went quiet, and it's a similar idea, right? There's that 400. It's about 400 years, a
Yeah.
cycle of just whatever it is. You could say it's the sun, which scientifically we know now that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
But there's this. The whole of our world, our whole existence is cyclical, and even catastrophic events seem to be cyclical. And we're now coming up to a point where we're getting right on the edge of when those should be happening. Like, technically, we should have already had another ice age, like an actual ice age, but it hasn't happened yet. Knock
Well.
on wood.
Yeah.
And it very well could. If something
Yeah.
were to go wonky with the sun, well, there you go. That's ball game. You're going to have an ice age.
Well,
Um,
probably what happens when they have these little mini ice ages, that's been documented several times with this cycle.
yep.
Probably what's happening is you get a bunch of earthquakes, it causes probably some tsunami stuff, and it causes a lot of ice to drop into the ocean, and that ice, that sudden cooling, causes the Gulf streams, the hot
Yeah.
water rivers in the water under the ocean, to shut down for a while.
Yeah.
And that's probably what causes it, right? And eventually they start back up and things get back to normal. But we don't know exactly if there's another factor involved with the sun. If it's just the sun, do keep in mind. I don't really care much about the Nibiru alien thing, but
Yeah.
do understand that every culture in the world talks about a planet or a sun, that the dark sun, the dark holes, the black hole sun that comes around, right?
Yep.
And they have different names for it: Nemesis, Leviathan, the dragon, Nibiru, Wormwood, whatever. It's
Hmm.
not just English, it's not just Jewish, it's all over the world. That there might be a secondary sun or a planet that when it gets close enough, it's visible, and
Yeah.
it's part of that cycle. It could be. But I don't really. That doesn't mean anything to me. In the next 30 years, if we get to see something like that and document it, okay, cool. But it doesn't mean anything. It's irrelevant.
Hmm.
What's important is that we do have these cycles. And like I said, I think with our technological development, most of the world is probably in a good situation to deal with it. And I hope we can document it really, really well so future generations can prepare, because that's the problem. No one's paying attention and no one's preparing. Well, some are. The elite are. Have you noticed how many of the rich people are building big old underground bunkers? Have you noticed
Yep.
that?
Pretty
Yeah.
much all of them.
Yeah. No.
Also, you have Bill Gates buying up all the farmland, which I don't care. I listen. I get it, capitalism and free market. I get all that, but we are so far beyond that now. We have to stop people from buying up farmland. It's just that simple. It cannot be owned by one small group of people.
Well, yeah.
That's just a recipe
Yeah.
for disaster.
Yeah. But it's interesting that they say, well, oh, they're worried about nuclear war or some kind of cataclysmic, damn it, cataclysmic
There it is.
economic failure, which I suppose. But I think these people are just kind of have their own direct information, and the scientists are saying the same thing to us. We're just not listening, and they're
Yep.
like, yeah, you really should prepare for this, because you don't know, because it could be one of the light cycles or it could be a really bad one. We don't know. That's the
Yeah, and
problem.
it's also they're obviously getting different data because here's what's hilarious to me: the elite, the actual elite, have these massive complexes, right?
Oh my
And a
God,
lot of
they're
them have these
huge, dude.
monstrous yachts, right? Like huge. Like some of them are way bigger than any one person or even a 50 people would ever need. They're basically floating cities. Some of these yachts, if you ever
Yeah,
look at them,
yeah,
there's only. I mean, you could say, yeah, that one's just vanity. Is it though? What if they
yeah.
know something? You know what I mean? What if they've gotten some information from people who actually know this stuff? Like, yeah,
Just
maybe you need a big boat for a while. Just say it.
just
Maybe you just need a big
preparation.
boat for a while.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
be
But
prepared.
they have these massive yachts, they have these massive underground complexes, and yet then they get on their airplanes, fly to Scotland, and all of them sit up there and tell us that the world's going to end and that the coastline's going to be gone
Hmm.
if we don't all give up our automobiles and eat bugs. And then they all buy beachfront property. What?
Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous.
What?
Yeah, but you have a mix of things going on. You have some well-advised preparation, and you have politic. It's not a singular thing. But you know, uh, why did this conversation come out of Halloween, right? And it's not indirect, because I'm telling you, the modern Halloween celebration we have is coming from a shift in an old ceremony that
Hmm?
people in the world still do, that is truly ancient. It's way older than Halloween, or the concept of it, but it used to be a joyous celebration of connecting with your ancestors. And
Mm-mm.
harvest time. That's what it was. And like I said, they would have a very similar type of festival around Beltane, which we celebrate as Valentine's today,
Yeah.
because they believe that the electromagnetic or magical feeling of the planet were same at that time, and maybe they are. But there was a shift, and if you go back and look with about when we think that shift happened, there was a really bad time. It was about 3,000 years ago. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know about this, but there was a cataclysm of such extraordinary levels 3,000 years ago that it almost wiped us out again.
Yep.
And it affected the whole planet. And people don't even
Bronze
know
Age
about that event,
collapse.
dude. Yeah, the Bronze Age collapse. That's right.
Yeah,
Um,
they don't because when you think about it, before that time, we don't have much in the way of solid history. We have pretty good from about then till now. I mean, as good as you could probably get, especially with you had the Greeks and the Persians and all of them. That area, especially in India, that area, those areas in China, of course. That whole belt right there in the middle of the planet, basically. We have pretty good insight into from about 3,000 years ago up till now, at least, especially compared to what we have before that, because we don't know things like who built the pyramids, what the Sphinx actually looked like before it got disfigured, why it was disfigured. Was it just time, or did somebody do that? Um, we know the fact that the Sphinx was buried in the sand for a long time. The pyramids were too.
well, don't start another conversation. What are you doing?
My point is right around that time, and then of course the burning of Alexandria. Right around that time, it's like history restarted, and
Yeah, that
I
happened
think it
several
did.
times.
I think that's literally what happened. I think history restarted because something happened that they don't know what it was. Like nobody really knows. We just know it was a collapse, a calamity,
Ended
and
ended Egypt.
yeah, Egypt was no longer the
Done.
power in the world that it was.
The Greeks came up
Um,
later.
Yep, the Greeks popped up a little bit, well, maybe a century or two probably after it, which
Yeah.
is about how long it would take to recover. And they did, and the Persians did as well, and they competed for a while. Um, and that was pretty much it. That's where most of Western history, especially, starts right about there, right at that Greek-Persian rivalry.
Yep.
That's pretty much where we start.
Right.
But there's
And we're
so much more
still
to history.
right.
Like
And we're still living
here's a
that.
great example of it. Here's a great example of it. The game Assassin's Creed Origins was set in ancient Egypt, but it was set in pre-Roman Egypt right before Julius Caesar conquered Rome, right?
Right. Right.
It was set at that time. But even in that game, they said that there has been more history, or there was more history between the time the pyramids were built and this time of this game to now, from that game till now. So
Yep.
2,000 plus years ago till now is far less time by a factor of 5 than it was to the time of the pyramids being built, or a factor of 4. So that says a lot. We just don't know a lot of stuff.
That's
We
true.
just have a huge gap,
That's true.
and it's
And
because something happened, and we don't know what.
yeah, and something happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I will not be baited. However, I suggest go look at some of those old photos we have of the pyramid and the Sphinx being buried by sand, and how
Hmm.
the scientists, the archaeologists, tell you, "Oh, it's over thousands of years. The sands build up and covered it." Go look at those pictures. You can find them, by the way.
Yep.
You can find Napoleonic drawings of them. Well, go look at that so-called sand that's full of giant rocks.
Hmm.
Go look at it, right? It's clearly wasn't covered by sand. It was covered by a gigantic ass flood. That's what it
Yep.
was covered by. And
Sediment.
sediment. Yeah, it's not sand at all. Go look at it. You'll just use your own damn eyes. But the problem was, you would say, oh, that was thousands of years ago. 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Everything was
Yeah, it was
covered,
baried.
and
It
they
was
don't even
buried at least
talk
200 years
about
ago.
that, dude. There was that
Yep.
the mud flood, right? That's
Yep.
clearly there's evidence up the wazoo for that all over the world, dude. Photographic evidence of this
Yep.
shit, and no one there isn't a single stroke of documentation. Why? You want to talk
Don't know.
about conspiracy theories?
Same reason they don't talk about the giants. We got giant skeletons all over America. We don't talk about them.
I will
They
not
say.
be baited though.
All I know is somebody has paid a lot of money to keep certain information that doesn't seem to connect in any way from common knowledge, and it's very weird because a lot of it makes. Why does it matter if people know that there's huge graves full of giant bodies with giant bones in America? There's some.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch in Ohio, in fact. That we know what's in there. We know they're giants, quote unquote. They're
You know,
very large people.
You know, the funny
Why?
thing about it though is if you get in that conversation, they shut up. But if you go and you look at it in the ancient man conversation, they have no
Yeah.
trouble admitting they were giants.
Yeah.
It's really funny because they won't connect one and two. And here's Gobekli Tepe is a very different conversation, Dave. But what was going on with that? That was involving a different cataclysm that was really bad, and that was involving very different things. But however,
Right.
here's here's just a quick little idea that I think probably is more true to our history than any of the other fun things we talk about. Because I love talking about Anunnaki and all that stuff. It's fun. It's fun.
Yes.
Because in the end, who cares what the truth is? It doesn't really matter, right? But here's probably what really happened. All right. We know that there was a different type of human that today we call a Denisovan, right? That rose up out of Asia,
Hmm.
seemingly. We don't really have enough information on it. They were giants. These things were up around, 2 to 3 meters tall, right? Which is a giant. It's not 20 feet tall. But that's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? But 2 to 3 meters is very plausible, and that would be a giant, especially seeing as most humans at that time are around 5 foot something, right? It's not like
Yes.
today. Matter of fact, the reasons you have some of these giant people, particularly up in Scandinavia, is probably because of interbreeding, right? But
Yes.
anyway, these Denisovans were bigger than we are. Their brains are bigger. You know those cone head things? That's them, right?
Yes.
And they were smarter. And they are much older than we are. They've been around a long time, and more than likely, they just evolved their culture, and they started wanting slaves, and they saw these monkey men, and they just took them and bred them into us, and used us for a very long time. That's probably what happened. It was just a different type of human that came along before we did, and they had their stuff going on, and they were pretty good at certain things. Now, were they space aliens flying around? I have no idea. I doubt it. Let's keep it simple, right? Maybe, but if they had a culture had risen to say Roman or Greek or even Egyptian level, well, they would be gods to a bunch of monkey men living in caves. All right.
Yeah.
That's probably what really happened. It's that simple. They're just this other earlier type of human that was successful, and they
Well, just think
eventually
if
weren't.
dogs,
Though
right?
we took over.
The canine, if the canine could vocalize, our dogs could vocalize what they think of us. To them, we would be like gods. I mean, think about it. We outlive them. A
Yep.
lot of them we had since they were tiny little babies. We always take care of them. We
Yep.
always protect them. I, to them, you would be a god, right? I mean, yeah, they look at you like a family member. I mean, dozens of studies have proven that they're your family to them. That's what they see you as,
Sure.
and that's because they're pack animals. But when you think about it, if they had the ability for actual rational thought, and they just didn't have quite like they were like your average person. They're smart. They can figure some stuff out, but then they'll still get stuck in certain areas. It would be hard to argue against a dog if they were trying to make the case that their master is a god, because
Yeah.
by every metric, they're a god to them.
Hmm.
It's the same idea.
Yeah.
If a human being came along, a group of humans came along that lived for hundreds of years in comparison to our 120 at
Human-like.
best,
Yeah. Human-like.
very human like, that were bigger than us, stronger than us, smarter than us, that could provide for us as long as we did certain things for them. They could keep us warm in the winter and stuff like that. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
what would you think? You would be like,
right.
well,
It's not as fun as Anunnaki, right? It's not.
yes,
But that's probably what happened. It's just an earlier hominid that just was very successful for a long time. But in the end, they failed because who's left? We are. Right?
right,
But I mean, it's probably that's probably the actual answer is somewhere there, right?
yeah,
Paulus says, "What? Wait, what? The pyramids were flooded and buried in mud? All right, fine. I'll be baited then. I will do a TFT on it, the mud floods, because it's not just the pyramids. Every coastal city on Earth was flooded by mud. Many feet of mud,
yep,
200 years ago. And I don't understand why there's no documentation because we had all the evidence is still here You can go look at it. There was clearly a giant mud flood 200 years ago for some reason. No one talks about it though. I don't know why. Because you can go look at all these older cities and they're all built on top of older stuff, or more, and like St. Petersburg is a good example, but many American towns too. Um, the lower levels are still covered by that mud. It's just now the streets are built on top of it, and they just are using upper levels. Many of St. Petersburg's buildings, people are living and occupying the second floor as the first floor. This
Yes.
is all over the world. And Paula
Yeah.
says, "Yay, baited." Damn it! I
But
should
no,
do it
it's
though.
true.
Yeah, I should do the mud flood.
It's there's weird stuff like that has happened, that we know has happened, that there's no, they won't even question it. They
There's no
won't talk about it, but
documentation
they won't
though.
question it. But they just don't, they pretend like it doesn't exist, or they'll talk around it. Another example, great example, the mini ice age. I didn't know about that until I started doing my own research on climate change, because here's why I decided that I don't believe them. One, I didn't see it in my own world like they said I should. Every time they said something terrible was going to happen, it never did. And two,
True.
the other reason I didn't believe them is because I knew enough about history and about like the science, the history of science in general, to know that this planet has been much, 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 much warmer at different times, way warmer than it is now. So if what we're doing is catastrophic, why wasn't it catastrophic then?
Yeah. Well, I
It
mean,
just doesn't. That doesn't. And they don't have an answer for that, by the way. They just change the question. They move the goalposts because they don't have an actual answer. Why would it be so terrible if the planet got 3 degrees warmer when it's been 50 degrees warmer on average than it is now? We know
yeah,
that
no,
for a
yeah.
fact. So why? Well, I mean, yeah, maybe humans might have it a little harder to survive. Okay, we'll adapt. We always do. It's what we do. We're really good at it.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
fact, if you haven't noticed,
Yeah.
it's kind of our
Well,
thing.
it's just to be accurate, it's not 50 degrees warmer, but I get your point.
Yeah, I was being
Yeah, I
hyperbolic, but it's
understand.
been
Um,
considerably warmer than it is now.
yeah,
Like basically the whole world's average temperature was like desert temperatures now,
several,
and
3 to 5 degrees more on average than now. Yeah.
yeah,
But and that's and that was most of the history of this planet.
yep,
However, an interesting thing to keep in mind is that with these kind of things that keep coming up and the things they keep talking about, it's I don't understand where the information has gone, because there's no way that 200 years ago, when there were newspapers everywhere,
hmm,
right, that this wouldn't be documented. But you can't find a single documentation of it, but you can find photographs of it,
yeah,
right?
evidence of it,
Yeah, and
picture
you can
paintings
see
of
it
it.
today. You see paintings
Yep,
of it, but you can also see stuff today that's still there. People just adapted. And this stuff happens all the time. And it's just interesting to me that it gets left out like that. But nevertheless, fun conversations. Halloween that we celebrate today is a lot of fun, but it's coming out of a dark memory, I think, because traditionally, same holiday was a happy one, not a negative one. And if you come over here to Asia, it still is a happy one.
yeah,
Again, it's shocking how identical they are. This is that ancient culture was global. It really was.
oh,
Uh,
definitely.
uh,
It's almost silly to question that now.
yeah,
When you go, you can look, you can watch. If you want to look at just go look at some of these channels where these gentlemen go to these ancient ruins, and I'm talking the ancient ruins. Some are in Egypt still, some are in Central and South America, some are in China. They don't go to the ones in China very often, but they do go to the other places. And obviously, there's ones in Turkey as well. You can see that these are obviously made by very similar tools.
yeah.
Very similar. And by tools, I don't mean chisels, because there's no way you're getting a stone that smooth with a chisel.
Well, they don't look
So
like
these,
chisels anyway. They look like someone
yes,
scooped it out like it was mud. And I think that's
yes,
exactly what it was. I think it's actually what you're
it,
looking
it's
at is
concrete.
concrete.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and you can see this all over the world in they're pretty much either the same color or very similar colors. And then if you go deep enough into these, you can see scorch marks all over the world where these stones were burnt. And I don't mean burnt like, oh, they got soot on them. I mean, stone will burn if it gets hot
It
enough.
will. Yeah.
These were burnt. You
Yeah.
can see it. Like, it's not even questionable. Yet, if you show this to most mainstream scientists, they'll pretend like you're a crazy person without any explanation.
Yeah.
I, the only thing that makes sense is there was some kind of global civilization. I don't know if it was one civilization or if it was a civilization kind of like we have today, where they have technology sharing all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Concrete is concrete. Yeah, there's different grades of it, and some's better than others, but it's still pretty much all concrete all over the world. Maybe it was something like that, right? It was just a common technology.
Yeah. Well,
But something happened to this civilization terrible. Something literally cataclysmic, and we have
okay.
evidence that
Yeah, and I
is there's
think that was
scorch
the
marks in the
12,000 year.
stone.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
and
was
all kinds of
that
stuff.
event. Yeah, yeah.
But they
But
won't talk about
well, and the funny thing is, people always have to go to these extremes, as in the Anunnaki I've mentioned several times today.
it.
It doesn't have to be that extraordinary. I understand that's more fun, and I get it, and I'm happy to indulge. But that it doesn't. It can be simpler, right? And you like, for instance, with the stone things we're talking about right now, you get people like, well, they had the ability to sonically soften stone. Well, I don't know. That might be possible, but you don't even need to go there because if you just go
Yeah,
look at some of these cyclopean places, they'll have corners of the blocks that have been broken, and underneath that, inside of it, you can just see normal piles of stone. So what they
yeah,
did was they piled the stones up in general formations and cemented them into a block. Is what they
right.
did. They filled it. They're filled cement shells. That's what they
Yeah,
are. It's just they're so old that the cement has got to the point of solidity that it
yeah.
looks stone-like. And that's
Time and
it's
pressure has literally
right.
compacted it into basically just into stone.
It
That's what it
looks like
feels
stone.
like. It looks like. Yeah.
And it's that's not that complicated. It's not a
Nope.
conspiracy,
No.
right?
And it's something that they definitely could have had if they had even rudimentary knowledge of what's it called? What's it called when you make concrete? There's a term for it, a scientific term for it. If they had that, not chemistry, but chemistry would help too. But if they had the knowledge that is used in the production of concrete and cement,
Well,
and we know they did for a fact because they had mortar. We know they had mortar. You can see the mortar.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they had
Well,
something similar.
the word alchemy comes from Egypt. Right.
Yes.
It's coming. It's an origin. Most people think it's an Arabic origin, and the way we use alchemy, our pronunciation is certainly Middle Eastern. But the word root itself is coming out of Egypt. They've had chemistry forever. Of course, they have. I mean, why is that? This is the thing that kills me, and I gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
Damn it! It's your fault, Thundero. Um, but here's the thing that kills me with archaeologists. Right? They always want to make it where every culture was completely separate and they had no interaction with each other. They didn't know anything. They're just stupid humans. On and on and
Yes.
on and on. Even though when we go and we test their teeth, we see that ancient man traveled, get this, 6 to 8 times further in their lifetime than the average human does today.
Yep.
We know this. We have the information right there, knowing that the ancient people moved all over the place a lot. We know they
Yeah.
did. But yet they ignore that and have to go to primitive, stupid man, had knew nothing. No, I mean, you have these archaeologists talking about like 8,000 years ago, we were literally just cavemen who could barely farm. Really?
It's obviously
Really?
not true.
Obviously
Just
not true. So
we had
especially,
massive mega cities that we found now that we know existed that are older than 8,000 years. There's no way that that's true. You can't support a city without great
no, it takes
agriculture.
time for a city to grow. It doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yes.
But
Yes.
anyway, I gotta go. I gotta go.
Yeah.
All right. But I got to do a mud flood TFT. I guess I got to do it
All right.
because they don't seem to know
Do it.
about it, and no one does. All right.
I'd say you'd be surprised how many people don't know about stuff like that. They also don't know about the giants. Uh, as far as I know, they're real. Nobody's ever disproven them. And there's just so many of them all over America, and not only America, other countries too,
Yeah. No.
that there's
No.
something going on there.
History's talked about them constantly. The problem is
Yep.
people, when you say giant, people think 12, 20 foot, 30 foot
Yeah,
is
yeah,
in
yeah.
their head, and that's
Right.
not how you should be thinking. Think
No.
2 to 3 meters,
Think
which
Goliath. Think
yeah,
like, 8, 9 foot, 7, 8, 9 foot. Somewhere in there is probably more realistic.
right. Yeah, that's
And
the giant. Yeah,
that's, I mean, every culture has people of that size in it. Every one in ancient history has mentions it constantly.
yeah. And
So
keep in
to
mind,
say that they didn't exist is silly.
well, keep
It's
in
just silly.
mind that the Denisovan fragments we have, they were double our size.
Yes.
So that's 10 to 12 feet, right?
Yep.
Right there. So, and that's not even argued, right? Anyway, I got to go. Take us out of here.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Happy anniversary to me. I hope everybody had a good night. I hope they enjoyed some form of Halloween festivities. I personally will recommend go see Dune. It's not, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a great movie, but it's okay. It's pretty good. It's more than worth the price of admission, I think. And it is, if it, and it already has been greenlit for the next one, we might be on the cusp of this generation's Lord of the Rings. Not that it's as good as Lord of the Rings, but I think if the next one's as successful as this one's been so far, it'll be a movie you will have wanted to see in the theater. It's a theater movie, definitely. So go see it, go check it out. The director seems to, at least so far, be trying to follow the script of the book as much as possible, and it's pretty good. There's some things left out, some things, arguably he shouldn't have left out, whatever, but it's still, it does have an ending. People say the movie just stops. No, it doesn't. It has a perfectly fine ending, especially considering they were planning on making a second one. Um, Go check it out. It's a good movie. Other than that, have a good night. We should be back tomorrow as long as Chester's free. I should be free, and we'll talk about some comic books later, everyone.
Later.